What's going on, everybody? I'm gonna wait about a few minutes for everyone to get into the stream. I'm live right now with Nuance Bro for a new episode of Make America Debate Again. So we'll let for people come in, but Nuance Bro, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. We'll just stall here for a second as people are coming in. Usually I blast music, but with the headphones on, that's not really possible. Let's see who's in here. I'll read off some people. We got Stone Papa Smurf. That's possibly a violation of terms. We got Red Rob. Is this thing on? It is now. Billy Bob, Danny Bauer. Noisy Sounds. There it is. All right. We'll start it up because it'll probably take a few minutes and then we're good. All right. So I'm here. I'll probably just run it back just so it's smooth for my podcast. I'm here with another episode of Make America Debate Again. I'm here with Nuance Bro. I want to read some dictionary definitions. We always learn a little something. So nuance, according to the dictionary, is a subtle difference in or shade of meaning, expression, or sound. My name is An0maly, which means something that deviates from what is standard, normal, and expected. Both kind of weird words that almost mean the same thing. So we might have met our match here. Nuance, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we could talk about a lot. And you're someone, before I get into it, if anybody hasn't heard of Nuance Bro, I know a lot of people who watch me have. He's very even keeled, and I consider him a matrix breaker. A lot of people, of course, there's right and left wing, politically, libertarian and such, but I really enjoy the matrix breakers who can actually crush the narrative one way or another. And he looks at topics that a lot of people won't assess, at least in that situation. And he really tries to, I believe, get to the truth regardless of which side it goes. And it is, unfortunately, extremely rare, even among my colleagues who I really like. Certain topics, I'm just like, ugh, where it seems like Nuance doesn't always take the bait. So thank you for being what I call a matrix breaker.
I'm just being me.
Okay, it's natural. It's authentic. So if you want to be like Nuance, you can't buy it at the stores. You got to home grow that stuff. Anyway, we're gonna start off with Trump, and then I have a few other topics and stuff I want to bring up. But a lot of people want to know on Twitter. Not that the critics matter, but I saw they're like An0maly's better than fence rider Nuance, and I get that sometimes too when I'm not hard enough in something. They're like, you're riding the fence. I'm like, no, legitimately, I don't have a stance on this, and people can't accept that. But I do really like Trump. I didn't vote for him. I say that a lot. I used to be more liberal leaning, but I just feel like they've lost their mind, and I find him to be pretty pragmatic and kind of just doing more than I ever expected. So the people want to know, where do you stand on Trump? Do you like him? Do you not like him? Or are you so nuanced that you don't even know anymore?
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much had the same standard for any president. It's like, do they do things I like? Do they do things I don't like? And, what's the net effect of that? Is it more on the positive side or the negative side relative to other presidents that I've experienced in my lifetime? And I would say so far, it seems to be in the net positive direction. But I mean, nothing by anything, not by anything crazy. I didn't vote for the guy either. I actually voted myself in the election. I literally wrote my name down, but yeah, I mean, I wanted to know, like, what you think he's done, like, so much. Like, what do you think, like, specifically, what has he done that you find so amazing? I mean, we have Supreme Court justices and all that stuff. Those are like normal things that any president to do, but you like his picks maybe better than past presidents' picks. But like, what do you think that he's done that's really had like a huge effect on the country that you find really positive?
Absolutely. Good question. So I started off myself personally and in my life, what helped me get to a certain place is I took away expectations, and I keep them very low. And then if someone does well, and especially for Trump, I really wasn't bullish about him. I thought he was just a billionaire, which he is, but I guess like sell out another politician. And I didn't realize what I consider is a matrix breaker. The biggest thing I really like is the wars in the Middle East, at least so far. The Syrian war, I realized that we were funding both sides of the operation, or at bare minimum funding rebels who seemed like they would work hand in hand. It's like they're fighting them, the whole plot didn't make sense. It didn't work pretty much anywhere that they tried to implement it. So I was like, when is a president finally going to come along and be like, this doesn't work? And there's Trump on TV like, it doesn't make sense. Who are these people? And at the end of it, he really did cut off $1 billion CIA program funding rebels, and it seemed like it really took away the power of ISIS and stuff. So I really like that.
Did he though? Did he though?
Yeah, yeah. Let's get a.
But I mean, when you look at the troop numbers, for example, like between Obama and Trump in Syria, at the end of Obama's presidency, there was maybe like under 300 troops in Syria, and Trump's administration bumped that up to 2,200. So how is that really ramping things down in Syria?
Well, here's what I was referencing. There's a few articles. This New York Times, behind the sudden death of the $1 billion secret CIA program in Syria. So a big reason why you have rebels who are fighting Bashar al-Assad because they're saying he's a terrorist or something, or he's like a bad leader, but they're also fighting ISIS. So it's kind of like a three-way war. And it wasn't like either ISIS is going to win, and that's not good, or the rebels will win, and then who's going to lead the country? You know, it didn't really make sense. So he did cut $1 billion program. And I know not just yourself, but a lot of people don't want to give him credit for that because he didn't do enough. And it's okay if you think he should do more. I know some people are like, oh, I feel like he's going to start a war with Iran, or he's doing this. But at bare minimum, I think we have to give him credit for, I've never seen a politician or a president cut $1 billion CIA program. To me, that's a pretty big deal.
Well, presidents cut programs all the time when they serve their purpose and they're done. So they don't, we don't have programs still going on for things having with the Soviet Union because the Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore. It's outlived its usefulness. But as far as Syria, Trump's, he's actually increased engagements in Syria. He's increased troop numbers compared to Obama by almost 10 times. And when it comes to drone strikes, he's increased them by about 50%. And civilian casualties have gone up about 215% under Trump.
Well, we could go at those, but if you want to talk separate issues, you said, people end programs when they're done to end. He specifically ended it. They weren't trying to end it. It wasn't at the end of its route. So that's, I think, a mischaracterization of what he did. I mean, unless you could really find evidence to
yeah, I'm talking about the broader Syria issue. I'm not just talking about like one program. I don't even know necessarily the specific one you're talking about, but I'm talking about, if we're talking his position on non-intervention and military escapades and things like that, he hasn't necessarily been this dovish person that people are trying to portray him as, if we look at the hard numbers.
Yeah, I guess with this type of stuff, I'm not weak and I'm not foolish, so I'm not the type of person that's like, okay, pull out of everywhere and cut the military budget by like 60%. That's never kind of been my philosophy, even when I was more left-leaning. I'm all for being strong and, even presence-wise, as long as I know they're doing the right thing. So Obama's drone striking, and you said they increased. ISIS is growing. So at least Trump, in his pursuit of, ramping up what may be troops and numbers, it seems like the actual enemy is being just destroyed, as opposed to Obama, where the enemy is growing and growing. They took over major cities in Iraq and Syria. How do we have the biggest military, all this technology where you could track? I mean, I could track my food from like across town, but we can't figure out where ISIS is, and they don't even have a Air Force. I don't think we were being told the truth. And I think Trump analyzed it and was like, I'm not going to get weaker, but I'm definitely not going to allow this to keep happening. And within a year and a half, I mean, ISIS lost all their, their strongholds in Syria. They're almost completely defeated. And even in Iraq, they had control of major cities. There's no way that was just by chance in my perspective. So I think he's like,
a lot of it was the Russians. The Russians did a ton to, reduce ISIS's, stranglehold on the region. I mean, they just bombed the crap out of them.
Absolutely. No,
but Trump said he was going to do. I mean, I guess we did things to some degree, but really we were working more in tandem with, the Saudis and the Israelis, kind of get the whole Assad thing. We hated Assad more than we hated ISIS as far as that whole conflict goes. But the Russians were obviously on Assad's side. The Iranians were on Assad's side. And they were more anti-ISIS and all the rebel groups and all that jazz. So,
oh, absolutely. I mean, but you're talking about from, a Hillary Clinton who wanted to start fighting Russia. So we were gonna fund rebels, fight Russia. Trump specifically, and he got a lot of heat for it. He said, "Hey, I'm gonna try to get along with them in that region. Like that, I think I agree with what you're saying, but that's specifically a
Oh
Trump
yeah,
thing.
we're not going to disagree on Hillary being more hawkish and creating more problems when it comes to foreign policy.
But dude, like I know you kind of have a similar, not that I'm not saying you are progressive because you're totally not, but the progressives who I like their foreign policy kind of similar to yours. You guys get it, but I feel like no one wants to give Trump credit. Like without him cutting that $1 billion CIA program of weapons funding to the rebels, without him
No, you can
totally,
absolutely give him credit. I give him credit
yeah,
for, saying he wants to draw down troops, but we haven't really seen that drawdown happen yet.
yeah.
I mean, we still have troops in Syria. He said it was going to be 30 days and out in December. We still have troops there. They're going to do a more gradual process, and that's fine. Whatever.
Yeah, that's where I'm on, where it's like I don't expect him to, because even I see people in the comments, they're saying stuff like they're saying messed up stuff about Jews, and that's becoming more like people say that stuff sometimes. But I'm like, listen, there's obviously elements of Israel and Jewish, like there's like 20 different battles going on, and I think that's what people even in my comments sometimes don't understand, where it's not just like America bad. I agree, we've messed up, but I do think a gradual process makes sense because you have Israel, you have, Saudi Arabia, you have China, you have Russia, you have bad people within our own, agencies and government on the left and the right. So people try to paint it black and white and they're like, Trump needs to remove all those people and it's all going to be okay. But we're fighting multiple religious battles. We're fighting multiple financial and, military battles that with like China and Russia moving all over so I feel like that's the one thing that people don't seem to get, where they're like, dude, just end it already. And it's like, dude, Trump's one guy in a sea of like total madness. So I respect the fact that he's not
but
just
at the
jumping
same
right
time,
into that.
then why is Trump hiring people like John Bolton? Why are they putting people like Elliot Abrams in charge of the whole Venezuela project, given his history? I mean,
Yeah, no,
he's talking about draining the swamp, but then he hires a lot of these swamp people to serve in his administration.
mm-hmm.
And he ends up firing a lot of them eventually anyway. So I don't understand why he's hiring them in the first place.
A lot of people I respect on the left and the right that I find that I trust the most agree with you completely with that stuff. And even me, my expectations for him were here. Like I really thought he was just going to be same old. So the fact that and we could talk about more of them later, because I know you asked, the fact that he's already pulled the trigger on like 8 things, I'm taking the L's with the W's, where it's like, why is Bolton there? I don't understand it. I'm not a fan. I don't trust what we're doing in Venezuela because I don't like regime change. But what I find about the anti-regime change people, almost everyone besides myself, is they're anti-American regime change, which is totally fine. Like it didn't work in Syria, didn't work in Iraq, didn't really work in Libya. I don't think it's going to work in Venezuela, but nobody seems to talk about the fact that China and Russia are regime changing in a lot of places as well. Well, maybe not so much Russia. There's the situation near their border, which is debatable, but China is really going all over Africa and even around here. They're starting to go to Venezuela. I guess the argument is they say, well, they were invited, Russia was invited. But if we're going to be anti-American regime change, I do think we have to really understand that it seems like everyone's bracing for another world war. So we don't want to be the people who pulled out while everybody jumped in.
Yeah, I don't know about bracing for another world war. Hopefully not. But yeah, a lot of China's activities are very concerning about them trying to become more of this, this empire. They're going out. The things in the South China Sea, very troubling with the little islands and trying to control those areas.
Yeah.
That's a toff one, but
I'm not saying there's going to be a world war, but like say if me and you are going to box and then I'm like, I say like, dude, we're going to not box anymore. And all your people are like, dude, don't fight. You're peaceful. And then you ramp down your stuff. And then I get 20 guys with me and then we jump you, like obviously metaphorically, but that's the type of thing where I feel like people are anti-American regime change, but it's kind of like a game of risk. Unfortunately, I don't think the world's a game per se, but if we don't have our chips in the line and China and Russia start ramping, and then we're like, hey, we're non-peaceful. And they're like, well, guess what? We aren't peaceful. And you just played yourself because we're in Venezuela. We're in Africa. We took over Europe. Like I don't want it to happen, but I do feel like strategically people are bracing for, at least being strategically set if there was some sort of war. But I hope not, because atomic weapons not a play.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between, invading countries and taking them over and basically annexing them versus trying to exert your influence in a region. So, let's say the Soviets, they go into countries that are friendly to them, like Venezuela, and Soviets, the Russians. The Russians go into like Venezuela, and they have good relations with them, strong ties. I mean, that's been the case for what, like 2 decades already. Like, are we really supposed to go in there because they have good relationships with Russia? I don't think so. It doesn't make sense to me, and it's not in our interest. And we end up getting blamed for all of it in the end anyway. And people are like, well, Venezuela would have been great if it wasn't for the U.S. intervening and engaging in these coups like in 2002 or 3 or whatever. And it's not. We'd be so much better off if we didn't get involved in all these different things that don't really concern us.
I agree. No, I'm anti-Venezuela regime change. I don't, it's not a major threat. I don't know why we're even getting involved. And you notice it's one of those things that the left and the right, you can't get Nancy Pelosi and Trump to agree on anything, but it's like Joe Biden. It's almost like their program tweets where they're like regime change Venezuela, and you're like, oh my god, like I'm not for it at all. I guess I'm just rolling. I'm like, all right, he connected in war. It's interesting because Julian Assange got kicked off Twitter, but I really liked his Twitter where he was like, Trump might win the Nobel Peace Prize if he can not start a war with Iran. That's where I'm at. I'm like, just don't rock the boat too much in Venezuela and Iran, and keep trumping on. That's how I feel.
Yeah, I mean, if he could just reduce all the wars, I mean, he hasn't, but he's kind of ramped them up. But if he reduces the wars, that would be fantastic. I mean, I guess what's happening on the peninsula looks very promising. I think that's fantastic. That's great. You have to give him a lot of credit for that. But, increasing troop numbers in Syria, Iraq, I mean, you can make arguments for why he did that and then why he's going to eventually draw down anyway. But I mean, I think to say he's been super anti-war, or, less hawkish than Obama is not necessarily true based on the numbers.
Hawkish isn't a word I would use, although that could be debated. But I would say he's doing the right thing much more often, and I've always been okay with a strong military as long as we're actually doing something productive. So I think the fact if he's ramping up numbers, but ISIS is actually decreasing and Syria is becoming its own state, and he's arguing for the people there, to me that makes more sense than less strikes, but somehow our enemies everywhere increasing and slavery is just popping up in African countries. So I like his strategy. And even in North Korea, at first people were like, dude, you're gonna start a war, you're going too crazy. But it's the art of the deal style where he just was like bang 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 bang, and now he's like, you're gonna be an economic rocket. And Kim Jong-un's like a little kid looking up at his dad. He's like, thanks dad, I'm gonna be big like you someday. Like, he made a play there. No one saw that coming.
Yeah, but how did that art of the deal work out with the wall negotiation? Didn't work out too well.
I say to a lot of people as well, my thing to leftists especially, I'm like, you think Trump is bad? Like, he's very liberal, and honestly, like, I think Bolsonaro and Salvini in Italy and Brazil are going way harder than him. Like, they're like, I'm doing it. Where Trump is like, even a lot of conservatives like Ann Coulter and others are like, he is very slow moving, and he's also he's not as aggressive and crazy as he could be. So I'm like, if leftists keep screwing up, like, you might find someone 20 times worse than Trump. Because I agree with you. He's not as strong on certain issues. Because I'm just like, build it, get the military to build it. It's our border. If the military can build walls in Iraq and we could send $30 billion to Israel, I don't see why we can't build a wall. I don't understand it.
So you think if the president fails to get something through Congress, he should basically go around them and act as like a sort of dictator and just get what he wants done because the Congress didn't give him what he wants?
I wouldn't say that per se, but with certain issues, especially with a wall around the country, I don't think it's not a military issue. And I don't know if military stuff, they've started wars in the Middle East without Congress. I don't particularly agree with that at all. But I just, common sense and pragmatic me just says, build it. I don't know at what point.
Of course, you can say common sense, pragmatic, build it, but Congress has to appropriate the funds and get it out there. It almost would have been less controversial if day one in office he just said there's a crisis at the border and built the wall, as opposed to having gone through the process of trying to negotiate with Congress and then Congress saying, no, we reject your wall proposal. And then he's just like, well, I'm just going to go around you anyway.
Yeah, I mean,
that's kind of extra constitutional stuff I'm not a big fan of.
Regardless of me talking about politics all the time, I'm not a politician and I can't stand politics. People are like, Ren, I hate politics because it is the yin and yang is like, it's great that it's slow moving because you can't become a dictator. But the bad part is it's so sold out on both sides that you can't get anything done. So it's like, do I want to, not rock the boat and say, well, they're like, we could take away the guns eventually with the emergency order. And it's like, I get what they're saying as far as it's the president being set, besides the fact that people have used emergency orders for other stuff. But to me, I do think it's a military situation, although that still might need to go through Congress, in the sense of it is our border. And these people in New Mexico and California are saying, we're telling the troops to stand down. Do they have the authority to do that? Like if someone waged war on us, can Gavin Newsom or the New Mexico mayor or whoever, say we can't have the military there? They say it's a separate issue, but
military. Gavin Newsom got rid of the National Guard, and the National Guard, at least for each state, I believe it falls under the governor's the executive. He controls the National Guard people for his state, I believe. So.
Yeah, and this division's not good because stuff like that, now we're actively working against each other out of spite rather than out of common sense and pragmatism. And their stance is now just like, oh, like, let's give them free healthcare. It's like, dude, come on, my man. So I just, as a pragmatic person, it's just like, get this thing done. But it does. I mean,
yeah, but at the same time, the Constitution is still important. I mean, the rule of law in the country. You don't want to just say, well, my guy's in office, therefore I'm okay with all this extra constitutional stuff. You got to stand up for the Constitution. It's kind of important. You can't just say, well, Trump is going to get it done. He's going to be pragmatic, and I like the wall, so therefore I'm okay with him going around Congress and violating the Constitution.
So what have they used?
Even the emergency powers stuff. I mean,
what have they used that for, though, in the past?
Huh?
What have they used that for in the past? Because there's a record of every president using it 9 times, 4 times, 6. So what did they use it for?
Yeah, so mostly the time they used any sort of emergency powers thing, it's been to like block property for people. So it's been like minor sanction things for like individuals, like this, this general in Myanmar or something. Let's basically sanction him. It's like a sanction. It's almost like a form of sanction that they use. If you look at the list of all the emergency orders, it almost always starts with like to block the property of, and then block the property of. It's almost always that. But at the same time, none of them, to my knowledge, have ever been passed as like a way to get around Congress. The emergency powers.
Why did they do that though? If they could just get that passed?
Yeah, that was what I was trying to explain.
Yeah.
The reason they have the emergency powers thing is more of like it's like a timing thing. If the president can respond to something that needs to be urgently dealt with, like in the moment, then they do the emergency powers because the Congress, it's kind of like an inefficient system. It takes a long time to pass bills and things like that, so the president can act immediately, and usually the Congress is kind of like, well, we either approve or don't approve, but there's never an emergency power that's been enacted as a result of the president not being able to get Congress to do something.
What if
the Congress rejected a proposal? They never did an emergency thing to get around that.
What if Russia and China, obviously hypothetical, if Russia and China stormed both of our borders left and right with ships and came in through the north and the south, does the president, in order to take military orders, does he have to go through Congress and wait for Congress to do it? Or does he have the authority?
No, that's why we have the War Powers Act, and they allow the president to act immediately. That's what I was saying. Like, there's nobody in
can
Congress
he use that? Can
to...
he use that to do this? Because, I mean, you could say, and if you talk 40 years ago, before cultural Marxism and political correctness destroyed the minds of everybody, and you say, hey, there's been 30 million people here illegally, that's an invasion. And I do agree with that, those wording where it is an invasion. It's just so slow. And to be honest, 40, 50,000 people getting arrested per month at the border. It's not as slow as people think. So any other society on this world would be like, that's an invasion. You could use that act, but we're so dumbed down. It's like, no. So, that's where I'm like, at what point does it become like slow warfare and subtle warfare?
Yeah, the problem is if it's been happening for decades and no one's done anything about it, and the rate has been decreasing as time goes on, like with Trump right now, it's the lowest in like 20 something years or whatever. I mean,
it's a lot. It's like getting.
You can say it's still a lot, but it's lower than it's pretty much ever been for a long, long time.
But is that my fault?
So if you're going to make that,
is that Trump's fault that there's been decades of incompetent leadership? Because on that same rate, it's like this.
No one's saying it's his fault, but at the same time,
well, why does that delegitimate
emergency to get around Congress? You don't get to violate the Constitution.
Well, you were saying the War Powers Act or whatever its name was, that is there, that he can take immediate action if we're at warfare. I don't see it as any less of a warfare just because they dropped the ball for decades. They dropped the ball in the Middle East. They've been dropping the ball on everything. So to me, that it's like, well, it's getting a little bit less. But to be honest, with all this lobbying for all the mainstream media saying, come, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to give you health care, it's going to increase again. It's going to get to the point where it's going to get so bad and weird. And with the caravans, it's like, all right, at what point is this a total setup? Like, oh, no, it's 20,000 people coming at once now instead of just like graduate. It's warfare to me. And I don't think the fact that they dropped the ball for so long and lied about it and covered it up and pretended like they were going to do something, to me, that makes even more reason to just get it done and build the wall.
Yeah, the language of warfare is not necessarily something I would use, because if you use that language, then you can almost justify taking war actions against those people, like shooting them and stuff. So that's not something I'm a fan of. But at the same time, Trump's policies, like the things he's actually done at the border, have resulted in less people coming over. So they have been more effective. There's people who, if you go, I think they did something about this in the New York Times or something. I think they talked to people who, like, they're just not coming up here anymore because they're scared of like Trump's policies and stuff. So it is having an effect in the countries where people were originally coming to declare asylum and all that stuff. It's actually, like, they're not coming up as much as they were in years previous.
No, he's doing good work with, maybe his rhetoric is working, but that, to me, that doesn't mean it's still not a problem just because slightly less are coming.
No one's saying, well, some people are saying it's not a problem, but I'm not saying it's not a problem.
No, I just don't think it's less of a problem just because slightly less amount of people. You could say that with the organization of caravans, it's even more dangerous. Who are these people? Why are they organizing in groups of 5 to 10,000? Like there's some sort of cabal that's just demanding entry. So it's like, for where there's been less because of good work that he's done, I don't see it as a reason why it makes it any less crazy. And like you were saying, with, if you call it warfare and then you have justification to shoot people, obviously I don't want to get people shot, but what really bothers me in America is we're so soft to the point where it's like, shame on you. 5 different times you might get a book deal and $1 million contract with CNN. So we're rewarding people for doing the wrong thing. We're rewarding people for lying, for doing illegal things, for being pro-war. We have such a sick, disgusting culture at this moment where we're almost living an inverted reality. And I do think there's multiple fronts of warfare, and this one being an act of war, I believe. I do. I
don't know about active war, but because who would you declare war on, really, and then actually engage in war tactics? But at the same time, it's just, we're not disagreeing that we need to get tougher on immigration. It's just one person's advocating for extra constitutional methods of doing so.
Well, no, not with the act that you said. There's
working within the bounds of the Constitution.
There's legislation for that already. You even said it, so it wouldn't be extra constitutional. It's there. It's just the wording of it would be debated by some, including us.
No, because you're saying you want Trump to do it through emergency powers and not.
Well, I'm saying I want him to get it done. If there's a bill, what's the name of it? The War Powers Act? Or?
Yeah, but the thing is, even those things are not
But your
necessarily
reasoning for saying it's not war doesn't make any sense. You're saying it's because they messed up for a year and it's slightly better than it was a couple years ago because of his rhetoric. How in any way does that justify that it's not a problem?
I'm not saying it's not a problem. I'm saying the president can't just unilaterally go around Congress after Congress rejected his proposal and then just say, well, I'm going to act as dictator and just, anytime I want to get something done, if you don't give it to me, I'm just going to declare it an emergency.
Yeah, but no, it's not even. I
feel
he is trying to do that.
Advocate for getting rid of the Constitution if that's what you want, but I don't think that's what you're saying you want.
Absolutely not. But it's just like at a certain point, if even I'm bracing now for the fact that all of society might completely deteriorate. So I believe in the Constitution. I believe in these laws, but I'm also a common sense, pragmatic person. And the truth is, what a lot of conservatives don't want to admit is the Constitution is just a piece of paper that we claim to follow and haven't really in many ways. So at the end of the day,
social construct, you're saying?
Well, yeah, but at the end of the day, it's like if this society and this government deteriorates any further than it is going to be Wild West in a situation of if we did get invaded from all fronts. Now, if he waited or waited, like he would have a very hard decision to make. It's like, do I do this? Is it an emergency? Is it that? Do I get at it? And at a certain point, if we deteriorate completely, none of this honestly really matters, and it's getting very close to that point.
Yeah, but I mean, that could be used as a justification for anything. That could be used as a justification, like this whole doom and gloom scenario of like, what if this could maybe possibly happen? They could use that as a justification to take everyone's guns. What if there was a insurgent population that used our gun laws against us? They used to actually make the argument. They used to say Al-Qaeda's advocating for terrorists to go and buy guns because it's so easy to buy them, and they could use it against the American population. We must confiscate guns all now through emergency powers. You could use that same rationale to get that done. And I'm sure you wouldn't support that. So
yeah, we're treading on very, very, very dangerous waters on all fronts. If you have
so let's not do that.
But here's what I'm saying: I feel you, but if you have no borders and you have politicians who are trying to give free healthcare to illegal immigrants, and your entire media and education system has been cultural Marxized to the point where people don't know up from down, we're treading on the point of like pure communist anarchy, which are two different completely things. But that's why it's like psycho, where you're like big government, no government. Like we're at the point where there almost is no rule of law, and that's where Trump is very important as well. Where it's
I understand the rationale behind it.
Is it though? There's billionaires that have raped 2-year-old kids and not seen a single day in jail. We don't have a rule of law. It's for decades. We've started wars.
2-year-old kid?
I mean, do the research. I don't want to name names, but just search. I mean, you Google it, you'll find it. That's
I know
all
Jeffrey Epstein got involved in some underage stuff.
No, there's some underage rape, not a day in jail, just rehab. Like I said, I'm not a whistleblower. It's mainstream news, but just you'll find it. You're a witty guy, but it's that bad where these wars, were they passed by Congress? I don't believe so. So I get what you're saying. I completely agree in the sense of it's a very slippery slope. But I am at the point now where it's like, okay, if we don't have a border and we have politicians who are lobbying for everything else besides American values, we almost don't have a country. If we have most of our politicians, especially left-leaning politicians, they don't want ICE. Okay, semi-debatable, but I don't agree. They don't like the police. They don't like pretty much anything that has to do with rule of law and basic things that hold society together, whether it's culture, language, law, board, like they're anti pretty much everything. So I'm bracing for the point of like, okay, it's the best of.
Yeah, but you're taking the most extreme elements and kind of applying it to, you're making it sound like it's these people versus these people, and these people don't believe in police versus these people do. I mean, the amount of people who believe in actually abolishing the police is incredibly small in the United States. If you polled even first of all, the Democrats in Congress asked, do you want to abolish all state police?
Well, no, I never said they were trying to abolish all the police. That's a total straw man argument that I never said. But
no, you said they're against
abolish ICE, and they're against the. If you did a poll and said, do you like the police or do you love the police on the left, what do you think the percentage?
Oh yeah, if you want to talk about like their feelings, like do you like?
They don't like the police. Yeah, that's what I said. They want to abolish ICE. Some of them, not all of them, but they don't like that. But that's what I'm saying, where I've had bad interactions with the police. That's why I always say I'm not like #1 police conservative where I'm like Blue Lives Matter. Like I'm just not doing that. But if you don't have police and you don't have it's fringing on the part of like you have more right and power and you have more favor in the media. If you're a criminal and illegal, they're looking to bend over backwards for you. Where if you're a law-abiding citizen who wants to own a gun because you're afraid of these psychopaths ruining everything, they call you a terrorist. Like I understand that it seems extreme, but I think we are bored. Like the fabric that holds society together, whether it be language, borders, society, laws, these are not these could disappear in a second, and we're very close to losing what makes us a functioning society. I believe maybe you think we're further than we are, but I'm at the point where one election and I see it all slipping away very quickly.
Yeah, I think a lot of us get a skewed perception of how divided things really, really are. I mean, if you go on Twitter like we are, where you're on, political YouTube and stuff like that, yeah, things seem really bad when you're on there because everything just seems so divided and like screw you, and everyone's looking to take each other down and dox one another. But go out into the real world and you ask people questions, like most of them don't even know anything about politics. They don't care. Now that's actually a big problem because then it allows a lot of those more radical to kind of do these things and have like the silent majority just not say anything. But at the same time, it's not mass people who are just actually getting these things, these negative things done. It's a very small select group of people.
I agree that the people overwhelmingly are extremely good people, but I would think of it to put it in an illustration of if you have millions of people who are sheeped into pressing a button and that button's killing other people, I get that they don't mean to do it, but if they're going to elect and follow and vote in these people who are going to do extreme things that are going to crumble society, I don't see it as any less dangerous. The people are great. Most people are amazing. Even most politicians, I'm under the thought of like they're so up their own asses and probably so into these lies that they actually believe themselves. Like I don't even think they're as bad as people think.
Yeah, you're
I
saying
just think
it's incompetence, evil.
Yeah, and they're so far gone that like once you get to that point, you're just so wrapped up in shame and lies that they probably actually think they're somewhat doing something right. Maybe not though. Maybe they're horrible people. Either way, I understand it's tough, but it's like
some are, of course, horrible people.
And most ground level people, Democrats, liberals, progressives, are very good people with very good intentions. I don't disagree with you, but if they elect people and the agenda that they're pushing, which I believe that, or it's funny because I think Cortez and Omar, they believe that stuff. They're like the young kids who believe it, but I don't think Schumer and Pelosi, like they're like, oh shit, these kids actually believe us. Like we were just saying that. So I find the dynamic hilarious of like the older Democrats. I don't actually think they believe what they've been preaching against Trump. The younger ones bought into every single lie. They're ready to, burn it all down for climate change.
Well, they don't necessarily even believe in the same things. I mean, for example, Pelosi is really open about wanting to go into Venezuela and, do what the administration is doing. People like Ocasio-Cortez or AOC and An0maly, they're clearly against that sort of stuff.
No, the
Schumer, who's very pro-Israel, and then you got AOC and An0maly, who are not as open. They're not going to AIPAC and stuff. So they are pretty different, and they're not like really shy about their difference.
No, absolutely. What I'm saying is like the younger generation is the one who bought into every leftist lie. Although I would say that even the Cortezes, they are right about a few things and then wrong about a lot. So I give them.
I like that she points out some of the things that nobody ever points out. Like when all those homeless people and stuff are outside and they're like, yeah, lobbyists hire those people as like standing in line to get access to politicians, and it's like, whoever talks about that, but that's a good thing to mention.
She's a wrench like a Trump, although I think he's more competent, but that's the product of nobody liking these Democrats. And now you get someone where I think their overarching agenda is awful and very dangerous, but they're connecting on things. And that's why people like them, is because even if you say she's 20% authentic, that's still better than zero. Like, Pelosi and Schumer to me are just so bland that there's nothing really there to grasp onto. So I get why they exist, and I'm starting to actually despite probably all my followers, what they want, I'm starting to enjoy it because I'm like, oh, she's the wrench in their system. But on that last note, just to see where we're at, and then we can move on. I feel what you're saying, but I think maybe our difference is where how close I think, although people are great, I realize that our Constitution is a piece of paper. Our laws are an unspoken rule that are held together by lawyers and judges and politicians and jails. It's a very thin line. I feel like it's a very fine line of like everything's good, but everything could not be good very quickly. That's why I'm very grateful and appreciative. That's why I don't like to rock the boat too much. However, I think we're extremely close to all of those being completely perverted. And what I've seen in the last decade, we're already further along than I think maybe you would say. But I agree with you that people are good overwhelmingly. I just think we're a lot closer to the fabric of society that holds us all together being completely perverted past the point of normal return, or at least without some sort of revolution that I don't want to have happen. I think we're closer than I want to be to that.
Yeah, and I think the approach of giving basically Trump dictatorial power and disregarding the Constitution gets us more like it gets us in that direction of like breaking down the fabric of society and revolution way faster than if we actually adhere to the Constitution and the rule of law. Because if you keep, I mean, that's what societies have argued for so long. All countries where they eventually said, okay, you know what, we just want a strongman dictator, and they give that person that power because they felt like things were breaking down and they wanted things to get better. It always led in a worse direction anyway. So I wouldn't argue for more dictatorial extra constitutional power for Trump. I think he needs to work in Congress. And if it's really that big of a problem that society is going to break down and collapse, well, then people need to vote for people who are going to get the job done. But if they don't, then I guess we live by the sword, die by the sword.
I guess here's a thing that we might not see eye to eye on it too, now that I'm hearing you say that, where I agree with most of it, but I guess you think if Trump does something that they consider irrational, or that they wouldn't have used an emergency order, they're pushing the pretense of we can do it for this, and that opens the floodgate of non-constitutional power. But my thought is, if a Democrat or progressive wins, whether Trump gets this wall bill or not via a bill that is constitutional that he can maybe stretch the meaning of, or the other way, I don't think it's any less dangerous. Just like I'm at the point where if a progressive or a Democrat wins, they've gone so far left and just so far on the side of what I consider to be just completely factually, statistically wrong, that them in office, they're already of like authoritarian mindset to begin with. So I find a lot of the things they project onto Trump, they are. So I don't think if he doesn't do it, doesn't build a wall, doesn't use the War Powers Act or stretch the emergency meaning, I don't find them any less dangerous.
I didn't make that argument. Say if Trump does that, that means necessarily that the other people will do this. That's never been my argument. My argument is,
it's opening the floodgate to anti-constitutional. I'm just saying I don't see. Maybe you think if we things have been stretched and misused so much, and not justifying it per se, but I don't see a leftist leader at this point not leading us to nearly hell on earth. And maybe that seems like a stretch to you, but I don't know that they're going to stop regardless of what happens or not. Like I find them on a path of complete destruction.
So
but
why don't you just advocate for getting rid of elections? Just say Trump remain dictator and shut down the elections.
Well, no, that's extremely dangerous. I'm not trying to rock the whole system. I want people to vote.
Violating the Constitution in a different way isn't as dangerous.
Well, I don't think it's a violation of the Constitution if you use the act. I do believe, I mean, 30 ask any society in humanity if 30 million people, 20 million people, more or less, entering your country illegally and then working with politicians, getting votes in San Francisco, if that's warfare or an invasion, every society besides the United States is saying, yes, China would not allow this. Russia would not allow this. Mexico probably wouldn't even allow this. No sane country in the history of the world would ever not consider this an invasion. It's only because we've been so broken down by political correctness and cultural Marxism. So I personally don't think it is constitutional. I consider it warfare, as far as I think it's no different than being people coming on boats to the sides. If any country did that, that he would be able to act without Congress. So I don't see it as different or unconstitutional.
But so where's your justification in the Constitution for that action?
Well, I don't know as far as what's the War Powers Act that you were referencing earlier. Is that not a bill
not in
that's
the
been passed?
Constitution.
Well,
That's
is that a bill that's
legislation
passed?
from, I think, the 70s.
Well, is that then that's legal and not anti-constitutional, correct?
No, first of all, he's not even, no one's even arguing that he's using the War Powers Act to get any of this stuff done. That's different. That's more of like if you wanted to go to war or send troops to the country sort of thing. It's a power that Congress decided to delegate to the president, even though people would argue that the Constitution doesn't allow Congress to delegate their authority that's explicitly in the Constitution to the president. So I would argue that that act is actually unconstitutional. But the point is, he's actually using the Emergency Powers Act in a way that it was never intended to be used, and is just like straight up unconstitutional because he went to Congress first. Congress explicitly rejected his proposal. I mean, they still gave him money for the wall, but it was less than he wanted. And he's just saying, well, I'm just going to, around that and decide to just do it anyway.
So
that's against the Constitution.
It's very murky waters. If we're getting invaded and
be clear.
And here, I'm not, but I'm saying if we're getting invaded, which I and millions of people believe that we're doing, and Congress doesn't want to do anything about it, they're kind of asking for a revolution. And that's what I don't want this to happen. These are very murky waters. I and millions of others believe we're getting invaded. If Congress doesn't want to do anything or act on it, at what point are they not, for basic American values and basic safety? Like, to me,
make that case to the American people. They're the ones elected.
They know it. They know
acting. No,
they know. That's why I'm saying I don't want to advocate for something that's unconstitutional, but we're getting to the point where it doesn't even matter, and they're going to spark something very serious.
But that's in your opinion. Apparently, half the country disagrees with you. So what part of the Constitution? I know better than half the country, and this is how all these bad ideas come to fruition.
What part of the Constitution says that you can't protect your country? What part of the Constitution says that illegals can come in and vote? What part of the Constitution says that a guy who pretends to be Mexican can advocate to tear down a wall around? Like, at what point does that become borderline terroristic? And that's unfortunate.
So that's not how the Constitution works. The Constitution delegates powers, and it says what you can do, and you basically can't do anything outside.
No, I agree. But if you don't have a country, the Constitution doesn't matter.
Okay, but that's your argument. You're saying that.
But if we don't have a wall, if we don't have
the wall,
no. But if we don't have a,
I guarantee you. Give me a timeline. When are we not going to have a country if Trump doesn't build this wall right now?
Within a decade, if leftists gain power on if they win office,
let's say it's a Republican administration, but there's still no wall all the way up until for a decade.
It's going to get, at this current rate, with not just a wall, just every mistake we're going to do, is going to get uglier than people want to really understand. If we continuously bring in tens of millions of people from the South, if we have people lobbying to bring in 60, 70, 80,000 people from Somalia, let's bring some ISIS people back. Why not? The war is over. This is a path to destabilization. I truly believe. And here's the thing: the Constitution. I feel what you're saying, and it's a very murky water. But the Constitution only matters because we have the United States of America. The Constitution does not work in Mexico. The Constitution doesn't work in Europe. Clearly, it's only if we have a country. If you have no border, you literally don't have a country. So if we don't even establish that border as our country, the Constitution, I agree with you. Now it doesn't matter. Now people are getting their guns and they're bracing for what we would consider a, complete revolution or a complete anti-American takeover from people who aren't our leaders. And that's how a lot of people feel. I know half the country doesn't, and they're out protesting in pussy hats, but half the country does. And it's the police, it's the military overwhelmingly, and probably the strongest, most well-equipped Americans. And people don't want to go there. Like, I'm not advocating for a world war or a civil war. I'm just saying the half of the country that's extremely well armed, and probably 90, 80% of the military and police force, We want an actual country, and without an actual country, an actual border, and actual laws that people follow, they're called lawmakers, and they're advocating for illegals to come in. Then they should lose their job because they're lawmakers that don't follow the law. So without a lawmaker that follows the law, you don't have law. We're the rule of law and the basic fabric of society that holds us somewhat constrained is all but disappearing. I think way closer.
All but disappearing. Here. You really think?
Absolutely. There's billionaires raping 2-year-olds and not seeing a single day in jail. We don't even have.
You're taking anecdotal examples of things which you're not even telling me who this person is that raped a 2-year-old. But I don't think
how many wealthy people have how many people that caused the financial collapse that literally affected almost everything. You know, how many billions of taxpayer dollars to all of these corporations who couldn't, you know, cut it. How many people saw a day in jail? There's a movie about it. You know, The Big Short. Nobody saw a day in jail.
I'm aware, and that's anything activity, but that doesn't mean
don't have the rule
of
we don't have law for the wealthy. We don't have law for politicians. We don't have law for illegals. So you're like, when is the rule of law not going to matter? Like, when are we going to get to the point where it doesn't matter? We're already living in it. It's just no one really recognizes for the wealthy.
At the same time, you're pointing to abuses of a system and using it as a justification to basically throw out the baby with the bathwater.
I'm not throwing out the baby with the. I'm just saying it's the baby's been thrown out and the bathwater's out, and half the country is well equipped and ready for.
See, that's what I think. I agree with certain sentiments of what you're saying, but I think you take it to its like the end stream and saying we're basically almost already there. And I think that's super dangerous.
When you we're at the point of look where they've got.
Hold on a second. Hold on a second. If you're saying like things are so bad and all this stuff, like look at the murder rates have gone down 50% in the last like 20, 30 years. You look at all these different metrics, like the world is doing so better. We are doing so much better as a country. I think a lot of this sort of hyperbolic language about how everything's going to shit, we're all fucked all the time. People have been saying that for decades and decades. I agree there's a lot of problems and we have to address them, but to engage in this hyperbolic nonsense and to say that we need to basically throw out the Constitution because it's just a piece of paper and our country's at stake. We need dictatorship right now, basically. I'm not going to agree to that.
I'm not trying to throw it out. I'm trying to save the sanctity of our country, what makes it a country. But I agree with you. I'm very optimistic.
By throwing it out?
No. By saving it doesn't matter if you don't have a country. That's what I'm saying. Right now, it's bordering at the point where
the thing is, you're saying there's not going to be a country.
What makes it work? It doesn't even work really now. Why do we start the war in Iraq?
How in what way does it not work? Like,
how did they start?
No one's saying it's perfect, but it works better than almost everywhere else.
How did they start the wars in the Middle East? Did they ask Congress?
No, they delegated the power to the president to go. They gave him an authorization for the use of force.
Why didn't they go through Congress for that?
They did.
I don't believe that's true.
They didn't declare war. We haven't declared war since World War II, but the president goes through the War Powers Act. They take their action, and the Congress Act approved. They kept approving funds for the war. Like they did approve that shit.
I don't know. I will have to look at that. I don't know that that's true. I don't believe.
What are you talking? They have people. Hillary Clinton voted for the war in Iraq in 2003.
Why are congressmen on the right and left from Rand Paul and Ted Lieu? How come they say that they didn't approve, that Congress didn't approve a lot of these wars? They've both said that.
They didn't vote for a declaration of war because we haven't voted for one of those since World War II. But people voted for authorization for the use of force on the war on terror and all that stuff.
No, I don't disagree. I know obviously things have passed in that, but I don't know the official declaration of war and the official.
No, we haven't declared war since World War II, but we have. They've done it through different ways where they say like people voted for the war in Afghanistan. They voted the war in Iraq. They just didn't officially go through the constitutional method of declaring war because generally it's they.
Well, you're saying it then. They didn't go through the official constitutional method. That's the same. That's the same wording.
Oh, I agree. I agree. It's illegal. Yeah.
But life has gotten better. I'm very bullish on the world in America. I'm not giving up at all. The opposite. I think it's the best time ever. Murders are definitely down. Lifestyle is better. We're very privileged. We have technology. We have opportunity. We have the internet. Greatest time ever to be alive. I don't agree with you. I don't disagree with you. Excuse me. Where I guess I'm saying is like the fabric that holds all this together. I'm I'm not saying that it's worse. It's way better, but it's a very fine line where I do believe that mental health and community and language and barriers and these things, and now that, you know, time is coming and the demographics are shifting into a point where we're at a whole different place in society, and that's great. I'm personally mixed with 4 different ethnicities. It's not like a white thing. Like there's certain people on the right that are like, that's not what it is with me, but it is like a cultural thing of like, we're at a crossroads. And if we choose the wrong path, I do believe it is past the point of no return, where in certain societies, like things can go from here to here very, very quickly, to the point where in 10 years, I could look and be like, man, we had everything and we blew it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. Believe, yes, societies are a lot more fragile than I think people want to admit. I mean, a lot of people don't understand this. They take everything for granted because things have been pretty great for their entire life, but things can go to shit very quickly.
And they're close.
I don't think that's an excuse to just throw out the Constitution.
No, I don't want to throw it out. I want to save it because.
But you're saying because you're saying, oh, we have to give Trump this extra constitutional power of declaring an emergency to build the wall, even though Congress rejected his proposal. I'm saying that's not how it works. And you need to actually, if it's that bad of a situation, dude, you got a YouTube channel, you got a lot of people on Facebook, convince those people and have them talk to other people. Win the war of ideas and convince people, change their minds. And if we die because everyone's so fucking stupid that they're going to vote for really, really bad policies that end up destroying this country, that's how things go. We don't just advocate for a dictatorship and say that's going to save the country, because it's almost never saved any country when people have decided to just give extreme amounts of totalitarian, authoritarian power to some, what's the word for it? I forgot the word. Just some dictator. It's not. It never works out in history.
First of all, we're winning the war of ideas. We're doing that, and it's been a great couple of years. But I don't want to throw out. You keep saying I want to throw out the Constitution. I'm trying to save it, because the Constitution only matters if you have an actual country, and you
don't save it by violating it, though.
We don't. Right now, we're at the point of not having a country. When you have, over the course of a couple of decades.
That's an opinion of yours.
No, it's
not.
Listen to the facts I'm about to say, and then you could decide if these facts are an opinion. Over the last couple of decades, you've had tens of millions of people come, to the point where the demographics are shifting from not even really the country, a border that is open completely. There is, without America, the Constitution doesn't matter. Like in the Middle East, anywhere that Islam is a majority, they go by Sharia law. And I'm fine with that. It doesn't bother me. That's your country. Do it there. But when the demographics shift, it becomes Sharia law. So if Pakistan was trying to run by a different constitution and that comes into play, that constitution doesn't matter anymore. We're reaching that point, not with Sharia law. We don't have that many Muslim population per se, but we're reaching the point where if the demographics shift in a certain way, the Constitution that I want to save and protect, not throw out, literally won't. If you don't have a country, the Constitution means nothing. The Constitution was made by mostly Christian white men, to be honest, who or Protestant, or I don't know what sect they claimed it by, but they wrote those set of laws for this country. And this country's becoming, and not just because of race or religion, we're fine with that, but because of straight no border, no rule of law, politicians actively lobbying for the pretty much perversion of the laws that they themselves passed.
To say we don't have rule of law is really disingenuous.
We are extremely close to it literally basically not mattering. I believe that we're extremely close. And we have rule of law.
Other countries, we're so much better off. Like
we have rule of law for some.
We're way better off on rule of law situation.
I think we have rule of law for some. If you have a good lawyer and enough money,
of course, that's the case in every country in the world for all of human history. That's been the case.
I'm not disagreeing, but we are extremely close to not having a country. I firmly believe that, because anywhere, I mean, what's your thought of, because I kind of rambled on, what's your thought about what I said? If the demographics shift in certain countries in the Middle East, and now it's happening in Europe, that's debatable to what extreme that's happening to, but the original ruling goes out, whether it's Iran or other Muslim countries, it becomes that. So do you think that's a possibility if our demographics shift here enough that the Constitution will literally just not even be there? And if we don't have borders,
Did you say the demographics shifted in Iran?
No. I'm saying when the demographics shift here, but in Iran, they had a revolution, which partially, if you look into that, there's people who meddled in it. But if Islam,
the United States basically created that whole situation.
I'm not disagreeing. I've talked about that many times, but
that wasn't a demographic shift. That was an external force.
I'm saying demographic shift here, over there, anywhere that Islam is gone. And when I talk about certain things, I'm not blaming just Islam. Like people will be like, yeah, I totally understand America's involvement in that. I've spoken of it many times. There's a lot of people to blame, but there's nowhere in the world, at least at this point, and not everyone was United States or for an intervention, where there's a majority of Islam that is that rule of law. That rule of law becomes into
sure. I mean, I don't know. We don't really need to make that case right now for the United States because
what you think we don't. You think we don't need to make that case?
Maybe 1% of the
but I'm not
talking.
I'm saying that thought process. Do you?
I understand what you're saying. The demographic thing.
Yeah, and in Mexico there isn't really a rule of law like there's here. There's kind of a rule of law, but there's certain groups like the cartels where they're above it. They'll just murder a journalist or a politician in broad daylight, and nothing seems to happen. The murder rate in Mexico is statistically the highest it's ever been in recorded history. So it's not going to be a Muslim demographic ideology shift, but there is a threat.
Doesn't that go to actually prove how strong rule of law is in the United States right now? For now, Paso and Juarez, they're literally on opposite sides of the border, and you just have extreme differences. El Paso, one of the safest
opposite sides. What are they?
Juarez, one of the most dangerous cities on the planet.
Opposite sides of the what? The border.
Yeah.
So should we tear it down like Beto says?
No, we're not. I don't think we should tear down any border. I think we should make the wall.
What separates our countries there? It's a border to me, it doesn't seem like even a constitutional or a congressional thing. Like there is no country with no border, to the point where I almost think people should go down and build it ourselves. Like all the Trump supporters that are handy should just go build it. Like. But
even when there wasn't a border between Juarez and El Paso, you still had way giant differences between, the crime rate in Juarez versus the crime rate in El Paso. It's because of the nature of our states and our laws and the enforcement of those laws and the societies and the culture. It's a lot of different factors. It's not just a wall that makes a difference. But I agree, the wall, you should put the wall there, but don't do it through, sort of emergency powers because the Congress didn't give you what you want. Art of the deal. Well, he really screwed that one up then.
I guess we can wrap it up with I do agree that for the last 2 years before the last election happened, they've totally blown it. And I think even people here will agree with you where the Republicans blew it. Trump definitely probably held off on it and then had questionable tactics.
They had the freaking House and Senate for 2 years. They did nothing on the wall. What was that about?
I don't disagree with you. And even like someone was telling me yesterday in person, this is a little side note, but they were like, dude, what's up with the SNL tweet? Like, I love most of his tweets, but I don't agree with that one. Like SNL, I do think is propaganda, but he's like, we got to look into that, where if I stand up for political correctness and comedy, I do agree that the TV's propaganda, but I was like, bro, pick your battles. So I don't disagree. I think they blew it for a year or two, and it shouldn't have had to come down to this. And now that it is, it's an unnecessary circus on every angle. And it is I don't disagree with that whatsoever. And I do think it's like
the House. Remember when Pelosi and Schumer were in the office with Trump, and then he was like, she's like, why don't you pass it through the House? And he's like, well, we could, but then it's going to get stuck in the Senate. And she's like, no, you won't do it because you don't have the votes. But then they passed in the House. He called her bluff and he passed it in the House and it went to the Senate. Well, why didn't Harry Reid just use the nuclear option like he did for the Supreme Court nominations, and they would have had the wall?
I don't like pretty much anybody.
Wait, did I say Harry Reid?
Yeah.
Not Harry Reid. Fuck. What's his name?
Schumer? Mitch McConnell?
No, not Schumer. The guy.
Mitch McConnell?
Mitch McConnell. That's right.
Yeah. Mr. Turtle Man. I like him. He's like,
yeah.
He
used the nuclear option for Kavanaugh, but he didn't use it in this case for the wall. Like the
I
60 votes thing is actually not in the Constitution. It's not the filibuster is not in the Constitution. He has the power to go over the Senate rules and to get rid of that and to pass the wall, but he didn't do it.
I like Rand Paul. Pretty much no one else. I like Trump. I like Rand Paul. The rest of them, I could
And
go.
Rand Paul agrees with me on the wall situation. He doesn't want Trump to go around Congress and to just put that up there.
Yeah. No, it's I feel it, and there's got to be hopefully another option. I'm just getting to the point where I don't know at what point these all kind of crumble. But very valid argument, and it's murky waters for sure.
Yeah, very dangerous waters.
It's interesting though. All right, we'll move on. Let's see.
Sure.
Yeah. Anything else you wanted to question me about Trump on, as far as like other things I like? I guess media.
I mean, name them if you want.
Yeah, the one that supersedes everything as well for me is the media mind control, and also just like total what I consider like cultural Marxism, or total ownership over people's minds, from the entertainment industry to now, even comedy TV shows to newspapers, where I feel like they kind of control the minds of the masses. And regardless of, left, right, it seems like they have a stronghold on it. And Trump is the first, or one of the only politicians I've ever seen really go hard at the media. And I think once the media cracks, people will have, a bigger mind for themselves and be able to make these tough decisions and such. So that's, to me, is like invaluable. The fact that he's gone so hard at the media is very good for me.
Sure, I like that he goes after the media a lot, and he did the whole like the fake news. Like originally, fake news was actually something that the media was. You remember, like that was a term that they created, and he used it against them basically. And now it's basically like a Trump term. But when you talk about how the media has a hold on the minds of the American people, I actually disagree. I think they used to have much more of a stranglehold back in the day, because people used to trust the news way more back in the day, and you had a much larger percentage of Americans who were getting their media from mainstream sources and TV and newspapers and all that. That's gone down because of alternative media. And if you actually look at polling, people say they trust the media much less than they did, 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Do you think that Trump is a huge reason for that? I mean, internet, obviously, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, I think he contributes a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, him, and even Bernie, for as annoying as Bernie was to me, it was following Bernie that I already knew the media was messed up, but it showed me exactly politically how messed up it was. So it was his campaign, not really his words, but his movement, that made me realize that it was totally corrupt. And I guess like that, the Syrian wars, the fact that he's just like, to me, seems extremely pragmatic. Do you not? And I know like you're nuanced, you got the shirt, you got the vibe, you got the glasses, but do you not see all these benefits to Trump? Do you think it's like where do you give him, like on a scale 1 to 10? Because my expectation for him was like
scales. I think it's I don't know. I can't say.
What if you stepped on a scale?
I'm right now, I believe Trump, like if you had to choose between like if he was president versus Hillary Clinton, I'm saying, Trump is a better option than Hillary Clinton for sure. But is he like the best president ever? I wouldn't say at all. But I would say he actually did surprise me. He's doing a better job than I thought he was going to do. We can say that.
You don't think he's done an above average job, or no? Just like okay,
above average compared to what, like the last 3 presidents?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say above average compared to those. If they're the standard for average, I would say he's done above average.
And that's the tough part for me, because he's the best in my lifetime, but that's literally my lifetime. It's like 3 presidents.
Yeah, best in my lifetime too, I would say. Just because we're young, we don't have a lot of that.
Aren't you pumped up about that though? Aren't you amped up that it's like, man, Trump's really taking the media down. He's switching up the wars.
You just told me society's gonna crumble. Everything's going to shit.
No,
we're all
I'm
screwed.
No, I'm optimistic, but I think the lines of which hold people together, just like the country, like there is elements of like what makes us a country, not just borders, laws, language, and cultural. I find that all of that, and this is where a lot of Christians agree with me, probably Muslims too and stuff, where you could call it the devil, you could call it evil, you know, you could call it wrong, you could put a title on it, but it seems like if you go to what the mainstream media is promoting, you go to what the entertainment industry is promoting, you look at what the rap industry, the music industry is promoting, you look at what most politicians are promoting, it's literally almost the exact opposite of what's true and what's good and what's right and what's just and what's fair. So my whole life I've known this and I've seen that, and I was like, something's not right. And I'm starting to see, although it has gotten better as far as overall, I'm starting to see these effects wearing on the people, where I find that if we don't choose the path of truth and love and light and good, then I keep saying we're on a one-way path to hell. So it's like you continue to let people in the border, you lobby to bring in people from the Middle East into our country, you pump the brains of our kids with all of this far leftism and cultural Marxism, you take over the education system, you take over the media. Like at a certain point, we're gonna be out of luck. And I don't want that to happen. I think we're strong enough, but that's why I'm even saying with, you know, I keep bringing up the fact that people are well armed and stuff, because of course I don't want that to get to that point. But when it comes to the Constitution, the Second Amendment was there in case things kind of broke down, or in case, you know, like the government overstepped they got too much power. Like you're saying, Trump, that's why we have the Second Amendment, in case Trump goes crazy or Hillary or the next person or Trump messes it up. And I don't want it to get there, but I do believe that we're one false step away from that happening, and everyone kind of feels this. So it's not that it's getting bad. It's just like, if we don't have a country, we don't get what Trump's trying to accomplish one way or another, we might find out that things are very close to broken down. And maybe, you know, and I think we're going to get to that point naturally, but it's one of those things, people won't realize how close we were until it happens. And they're like, oh, shoot, maybe we shouldn't have lied for 22 decades and lied to the kids and lied on the media and pushed and pushed and pushed and opened the border and flooded people with, you know, 40 million people that, you know, completely changed the culture and the mindset, and then pumping all the kids with this music of death and violence and murder and rape. Like, and it's just like, yeah, that's not going to lead to a path of, like, there might be less murders now, but I don't, just the common sense, pragmatic version of me is like, there's no way this is going to work out well if they continue going this direction.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, we also have a bias, like just biologically, we have a bias towards looking at all the negative things that could go wrong, that could basically kill us. And we oftentimes don't see the positive, which actually balance out a lot of those negatives. So there is a yin yang effect in a sense.
Absolutely.
If you go back in the 1950s, even when things were amazing, you still had people who were talking about doom and gloom. You had the freaking Russian the Soviets with the nukes, and kids had to get under their desk, and all these crazy things. Rock and roll was coming in, and they're
absolutely
corrupt the youth and everything. I mean, there's always these ideas that, you know, everything's going to shit all the time. And it's an idea that's, you know, it's seductive because our animal lizard brains like to look at that sort of stuff and analyze the threat. And it's what generates clicks. That's why media puts out a lot of this stuff that, like you said, it's oftentimes goes against all the good things that are good in our nature, like, you know, family and tradition. Like, but if you put out all about family and tradition, it's not going to sell. That's why they put out the stuff about, you know, sex and this and that, because it generates more clicks. It's what humans naturally gravitate towards because of our selective focus.
No, and I agree that times are good. My warning is more like most people, and even on the right, they're like, it's terrible, it's terrible, it's terrible. Or even on the left, it's terrible, it's terrible. I'm saying, I'm agreeing with you in the sense of this is the greatest time ever, but it won't be for very long if we continue down this path. And a lot of these things you're talking about in the 70s and 80s, they're starting to come to roost, where I would have said in the 80s, you're crazy with rock and roll music. It's fun, it's dope, and it was cool. But those messages in music and those lifestyles, you see in the Black community, you have 70% plus, you know, parents out of wedlock. In the white community, it used to be almost non-existent. Now it's like 30, you know, up to 40%. My parent, I'm a product of a divorced household. Although my parents luckily are really great people. Thank you guys. They'll see that and be like, hey, I'm like, no, I love you guys. You're great. But it's becoming like all those things where like, oh, I feel like it is coming to roost in a little bit, where it's, you know, I wouldn't say that all those happened and they were wrong about it. I would almost say, oh, they were like, my mom used to complain about how people were on welfare and she had to work hard. And I used to think she was so mean and like hateful, but now I'm like, oh, I get it. She worked her ass off for low paying jobs for decades, and her money was getting stolen by the federal government. And I was like, oh, I get it now. And then I live in, I think you do as well, I'm not sure, but California, highest taxes, most poverty. So it's like, and even it's gotten better in my city, but homelessness and trash, I've been here for 5 years, it's gotten significantly worse to the point where it's unavoidable. And it's like, there are things that are getting better, but the fabric of mindset where we have record high suicides because people's minds aren't right, and social media, drugs have part to play. But I do believe it's the degradation of our culture that is really suffering. And I don't know that even certain things were good, certain things were worse back in the 60s, 50s, 40s, obviously, but you can look at certain statistics for every community and it was better in many ways, where it's like, why, if we're so great, which we are, why is our food industry awful? Why is McDonald's in America disgusting? But if you go to Europe, it's actually like, why is our own stuff bad? Why are our pills more expensive to our own people? It's like, for all the great things that we're doing, I love America, and I feel like our culture has gotten to the peak level disgusting where there needs to be like a whole mental awakening soon, or else Satan himself, Nuance Bro, will come reap the benefits.
A lot of those things that you mentioned, they have to be put into context. So if you talk about, record high suicide rates, them being so much higher, you have to look around the world. Where do we see suicide rates being so much higher? It's in these developed nations that are actually doing really well on almost every other metric. It's high in Japan, South Korea, a lot of the European countries. I mean, it's really high there, and they have almost no murder rates. In fact, in places where you have super high murder rates, you almost see no suicides. So if we're going to talk about problems, you can always focus on a problem and be like, wow, things are so bad. But you don't look at the other side and see, oh, wow, things are so good on that front.
When you say you don't look at the other side.
Time.
Yeah, no. Well, you're saying you don't look at the other. I do look at the other side. That's a false framing. Like,
yeah,
I
why
always,
would we bring up the high suicides as like how society's deteriorating when in a sense, like suicides are a privilege of, really developed societies that are doing well in a sense.
Absolutely.
So that's just the nature of how things go.
I agree. And a lot of the problems are from us doing so well. And I don't disagree with that. But my two questions for you are, do you think we have a huge mental health problem? And there's a good meme as well where it says, good times create that meme where it's basically like, we're at the good times, obviously. So it's like, that's where I feel like great times create weak people. Weak people create hard times. So I feel like we are the generation of weak people that are going to create hard times if we don't get our act together.
No, it's absolutely possible. And I actually put a tweet a while back that got a lot of attention. And it was this idea that I think we need some form of mandatory like hardship training, because a lot of people, because life is so good, people don't know what hard times are really like. They don't know how to build character that only comes from certain things, like having hard times or experiencing like I was lucky enough where even as a kid, I was able to travel to a lot of different types of countries, and I was able to see just like the disparity between certain countries, like rule of law situations, just different cultures, how people think and behave. And, it really does affect you when you can actually see the extent to how different things are in the world. But a lot of people, they grow up in their little bubble. They never leave the tri-state area. They think like where they live is just how everything is. And yeah, they know things are going on in Syria, but they watch it on a television screen. They're super disconnected. It's almost like it's a movie. They can acknowledge it's happening in the world, but it doesn't really connect and hit home and like as if you were really there.
We're gonna get hard times training. I agree. We're gonna get it in real life because we're shifting the demographics and the culture and the mindset. And to me, it's not like, it has nothing race, religion. As long as, and this is where I agree with conservatives, as long as you're gonna buy into the basic values of freedom and somewhat rule of law, be a good person. These are transcendent ideas, but especially in America, we like to try to live by them. Then it's okay. But if you notice in a lot of these countries that you were mentioning, like Japan and China, very strict immigration, very strict refugee, very low crime, very low terrorism. That's not a coincidence, and it's maybe controversial to talk about, but we're shifting the demographics. We're bringing in a culture that doesn't necessarily agree with us statistically, and then we're not pumping them like we used to with like a, hey, this is America, be grateful. And a lot of people are. A lot of my immigrant friends are the realest ones, but they're pumping the kids and all these people with like a message of hate and violence. So it's like not only they're bringing in cultures and ideologies that don't mesh with us, but they're pumping those ideologies into the people who are here. And eventually, like, I'm already starting to see it in areas I grew up. They used to be lower middle class, like certain areas that I was born and raised. And now that they're breaking in, you know, different people and different ideologies, it's getting worse. It was always not wealthy in these areas, but there was never.
But you also see
there
that
was
you
never
also
crime.
see other. You also see the opposite effect. So I also saw areas where I grew up in, or areas where I frequented, and I saw a lot of areas that were really shitty, and they got a lot better because of things like gentrification, which is controversial, and people are like, "Oh, gentrification's bad," but in a sense, it's actually very good in certain ways because it can lower crime and really develop certain areas, and rising tides all boats. It actually improves a lot of people's wages and things like that. But I think this whole immigration debate, people are like, well, if the demographics change, I think a lot of it you can also argue is just the scale, like how fast do things also happen, like the scale and rate at which things like immigration happen. If you imported, like, let's say 100 million people tomorrow of a different culture that's radically different from ours, yeah, it's going to create a ton of problems. But if maybe, let's say those 100 people over 1,000 years, it would be a lot different, because then you have people who integrate into society. If they don't create cultural enclaves and they intermarry and they have kids and they assimilate to the culture, it's way different. So that 100 million could be way, it wouldn't be as destructive if it happened over a longer period of time versus a short period of time. So you have to take in a lot of those things into account. I think a lot of people were like, well, these people are anti-immigration. It's like, well, no, we can be pro-immigration, but also realize that there are problems if you import masses of people who have different cultures and different beliefs, and maybe they don't necessarily even want to assimilate or be Americans. You got to take all those into account. So,
well, I'm going to agree with you here, and I know it's not politically correct to say, but I don't care. In areas that gentrification is happening, the rent's going way up, and it's not good for locals in that sense. But the reason it's getting safer is because it's areas that aren't very white becoming more white. And statistically, just FBI statistics, the white population is committing a smaller percentage of crimes than 6 to 12% of the population of others. So yeah, I agree with you, but that's kind of what I'm talking about, where in the media, the white man is the devil, the white person is the worst, the white country is the most racist. But in reality, it almost seems like the opposite. It seems like Europe and America are where everyone wants to go. And when the big bad white person comes to town, prices definitely move up. And I know people that are like, An0maly, help me with gentrification's raising my rent. And I'm like, I'll see what I can do. I don't disagree. That's a problem. But yes, safety does go up. And, I have friends, like black friends from Brooklyn, who are like, dude, stop and frisk and gentrification. They were stopping a lot, but he's like, it did get safer. Like it's the truth. And
sure, and also race is just one metric. But for example, it's not just white people moving in, it's wealthy white people moving in, that you have to take those into account as well. It's not just like, meth heads from Arizona or something moving into these gentrified neighborhoods, which would also,
well, meth heads from Arizona aren't moving more than 5 feet usually. They'll pass out on the couch. So yeah, no, I'm just saying,
meth heads are passing out. I don't know. They say these.
Well, you think meth head? Yeah, you might be right. But once the high goes down, but it's like certain elements. I'm Puerto Rican, Italian, Polish, Czechoslovakian. I have family that's like, I have a mixed family because I have stepmothers and stepfathers and such. But the truth is, it's like Mexico is having its own issues, and it's having, record high crime rates, and their rule of law is not, that's okay. But like at a certain point, if you don't have, and you'll probably semi agree with this, I don't know, if you take in like, yeah, it's not a problem, but like it's just basic math and science. It's gonna become a problem. And it's like, you have a population that's doing this, and not only are they not trying to fix the problem, the media, like in Chicago, we have a horrible problem. And I'm no super fanatic of police. I know police can be corrupt, and they're humans who have a lot of power that abuse it, I'm sure, quite frequently. I've seen it in my own town where I'm from, and I used to really not like police. Now I'm getting to the point where I'm not so hateful. But in Chicago, there's a huge epidemic that no one wants to talk about because it's inner city crime. And I believe the media is complacent in the destruction of the Black community, in the sense of, instead of trying to help them and get them out of it, not only financially, but like mentally and spiritually, they're doing the opposite. They're blame, victim. There's nothing you can do wrong. And it's not the truth for any society. Like I like what they call like the most extreme people. That's what I'm starting to listen to now. I'll listen to Farrakhan or someone like, I want to hear what white people and other people are doing. Give me the tough truth. You know what I'm saying? Say what America did. Tell me all the evil things America did, and then we can help.
Yeah, I don't know if Farrakhan's the best arbiter of truth.
But no, I'm not saying. But and I do actually have something to bring that up on. And now you're going to gain favor with my people because they seem to overwhelmingly hate Farrakhan. But that's just my personality, where it's like, I'd rather that and not agree with some of it and agree with some of it, rather than this like sugar coated, like, no, there's no way you can do stuff wrong. And white people are really racist. Like, no, give me the stats, give me the facts, give me all the bad stuff you could say about everybody. And then let's weed through it. What's true? Obviously the first rule is people are individuals. So there's going to be anomalies or nuances in every in every gender, ethnicity. Like, all women don't have to do this, but statistically, and people are afraid of those type of things now. But even when I find it hilarious, I'm part Polish, and they used to say Polish people are stupid. I don't know why, if that roots in truth or something, but I never necessarily got mad at it. You know, I was just like, there maybe like, because I am kind of clumsy in certain ways.
It was typical like, anti-immigrant sentiment. That's, you know, if people don't speak your language, they appear dumber to you.
But maybe like Polish, I am a little bit clumsy, but I'm also coordinated. Like, maybe there's elements of truth. Like, there's certain, like, if you look at the NBA or the you know, there's statistically a small percentage of the population is overrepresented. You could say it's, people say this, that, there's a lot of explanations for it historically, but that's okay. Like, the point I'm getting to is, if we all are comfortable with ourselves, we're not going to get mad at the stereotype or the, you know, unless someone is trying to force it on you and you're like, relax, I like anime, I don't want to play basketball. Like, but it's, yeah, I find that the
problem is, a lot of times people will take those statistics and not understand that it means averages, and then they'll apply it to everybody. That's the problem. It's a lot of people who just don't understand how statistics work. But on the immigration question, I think a lot of people, they oftentimes want to paint it as immigration good, immigration bad. It has to be that sort of binary. There's no nuance to it. You know what I'm saying? So we can agree. We both agree. I assume that mass immigration, like if 100 million people came tomorrow, that's a horrible thing. That's just bad.
But it's almost pretty much
regardless
happening.
Of where they come from.
It's pretty much happened over time, where
it's like, it's not 100 million people are not coming in one day.
How many illegals do we have now? How many tens of millions?
Estimates go from 11 million to about like 25 million or something.
It's a lot, though. If they came at one day, that would be a crisis. So that's where it's like,
yeah, if they came in one day, don't come in one day. That's
yeah, but if my house,
a lot of the people who cross the border oftentimes don't even stay here, and they go back to their countries a lot of times.
If I don't want,
I know people who've crossed the border like 6 times.
No, it's ridiculously easy. But they told me, my friend who's Mexican, he said he forgot his ID, and they asked him, they're like, who was the last president? And he was like, he said some like Abraham Lincoln or something. Like, he literally was like drunk. He didn't even know. And they laughed and let him in. Like, he got the question wrong, and they're like, haha, you're good. And they're like,
he was like, dude, talking about ports of entry. I was just talking like,
it's that easy though. but all right. If I don't want this much of water to flood my street, or, you know, this much water, and it slowly increases, when it gets to that point, I don't think it matters that it took 10 years. Like, now I got to get,
but you're assuming if it slowly increases, it's going to stay at level, and it's not going to actually disperse.
It's not going to go down, bro. And I mean, bro,
you assume it's not going to go down, but I say, if you looked at other methods, like immigration in the past from other communities, a lot of them actually did integrate into society. The problem comes when you put people in these cultural enclaves and you create these little neighborhoods. Like, we had Chinatowns and Japantowns and Koreatowns and, you know, Little Italy and all those things. That's not a good thing. You don't want to put, you know, people in these hyper concentrated areas where they're going to basically not assimilate into the culture.
Yeah, but they're doing
multiculturalism.
Yeah.
sense.
They're doing that though in not Somalia, might as well
Yeah,
be
that's
now.
bad policy.
But
You want people to be integrated.
in Minnesota, you know, An0maly one, I believe. I mean, there's 90,000 people in that community of Somalians. So they basically Somalified that community. Okay, whatever.
Yeah, that's
But
not a good thing. It's not good to have these cultural enclaves.
yeah,
I agree, and we can.
yeah.
It's not just immigration. Yes, immigration. No, it's also about how you do it. So that's what I'm about. I'm about the actual details, and we need to focus on the details and not just say, well, is it either good or bad? It's like
Yeah.
it can be good or bad either way.
Is the media the evil enemy of the people for basically advocating for these type of stuff, that the degradation of our society, the total, you know, non-love of our basic culture of freedom and, you know, what I would consider personal liberties or whatever that we still somewhat have? You know, are they wrong for, it seems like they're not only pro illegal immigration, pro separation in a weird way, you know, with all this identity politics, insanity. Do you think they're largely responsible for stuff like that? And probably the total lobbying of those people coming there, for which maybe they probably just literally planned. Sorry, I got a little off topic, but do you think that
they're largely responsible for a lot of bad things happening? And I'm just really against hyper centralized, concentrated power in any sense. For example, Silicon Valley controls, you know, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and like all these different internet things that we all use and love. It's all hyper. It's kind of a bit of a paradox, because these mediums are almost kind of like, they're viewed as like democratized, or like the internet's kind of this sort of decentralized power that allows people like you and I to get our ideas out there. It's not super hyper controlled, but at the same time, all those mediums are hyper concentrated in this small geographical area called Silicon Valley. And the same thing's true for mainstream media. A lot of it's in New York and DC, and it's just all hyper concentrated. And even people at Fox News who pretend they're like these right-wing Republicans, at the same time, they have this like cosmopolitan bias of being in New York City. They're in their own little bubble. They don't really understand the rest of the country. So
yeah,
and I don't like when all that stuff's super hyper concentrated in small geographical areas.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you brought up, I got a good question for you in a second, but I like the fact that you brought up that the people are good. I agree with that. I live in California. People are like, you got to leave. Now, California is filled with amazing people. I could chop it up with an illegal, this person, that person. We're all good in the hood. It's more just like the macro management of our society. You know, that's what, but like on a local scale, I always say, I'm not a police officer. I'm not a politician. My job is not to deport people or be mean to people. My job is to make sure my community is safe. And, you know, so it's all love on that, but we're weighing in on a bigger thing. So what I want to get, and this is actually Nuance, you're going to like this, because this is going to gain you great favor with my crowd, and it's going to put me in a bad light, but I like to nuance it up like you. So I'm not afraid of it. So
are people in the comments like hating me right now? I don't know.
There's a lot of people are hating on Jews, even though we weren't even talking about them a lot. So once I went on Owen's stream, my friend Owen Benjamin, I feel like now we got a lot of people. But he does good work. He's hilarious. But since then, people have been going hard. Anyway, no, yeah, some people are saying Nuance Bro is like CNN, and they're going kind of hard. But he's not. It's we're gonna get into it in a second, but he's, you know, Nuance does really great work. Check out his videos. He's nothing like CNN. He's his own entity, whether you agree with it or not. And he does.
And just for the record, like I like to be a little contrarian. So even if I might agree with him on a lot of things, I'm gonna try and play a little more on the other side, just because, you know, you frame this as a debate, so I'm gonna try and make it a debate.
No, that's your whole. Anyway, what matters is the truth, and what matters is the work. And you do better work than most people. What I've seen, you're able to break through narratives in a smart way, where it's very rare. So I know people they're saying pick a side, do this. Like this is, yeah, it's healthy discussion, but make sure you do check out and show Nuance Bro love. He's the real deal, or else I wouldn't have him on here, or I would be going harder. But anyway. I want to talk, because you did a video on An0maly, and you broke down basically how the right wing and Shapiro, well, I guess he is right wing, they were kind of exaggerating to the extent of what they were talking about. And we were both in agreement of like, we don't agree with Ilhan. She has said some troubling things, but if you want to be honest, you got to separate those from this. And they were conflating them. Really, really good video. You showed quotes from Trump and everyone, but I disagreed with one thing that's going to gain you heavy favor, and it's going to put me in a bad light. So we'll flip roles. You said after all this, you said that, you know, it's not like Louis Farrakhan, who is obviously anti-Semitic, you said. And like I said, honestly, I've realized 95% of my audience hates him and is going to agree with you. But what's your evidence that he's anti-Semitic, clearly anti-Semitic?
Oh, I don't know, when he says the satanic Jews, or when he, you know, he
all right, let's go. Let's go one by one. All right, because I'm a Nuance Bro myself, and I've heard troubling things from Farrakhan. I listen to him quite often, and there's things that I don't agree with, and largely I would like to debate him on certain things. But I find that a lot of the things that people think he said, he never actually said, or they take out of context. So we're gonna go through those, even for my audience, who is now probably gonna hate me, but low key they love it. So satanic Jews, that's a reference from the Bible, actually, Book of Revelation. So it basically says, you know, there are Jews who are not true Jews.
Yeah, but why do you think he says it?
I will make them of the synagogue of Satan. But that's like saying, why do you think Nuance Bro says he doesn't like multiculturalism? Is he racist? So that and a lot of what I find is a lot of Christian conservatives who hate Farrakhan will say the media is satanic, they're evil, and some of them are Jewish. So if those people, you know, they're satanic Christians in the media, they're satanic Jews. Is that not what everyone's saying, just in a different way?
You're saying the people in the media are satanic Jews?
Well, no, a lot of right-wingers will say that it's satanic people in the media, but then they'll say, oh, Farrakhan called Jews satanic, but I feel like they're talking about the same
Yeah, but
people.
one's anti-Semitism and the other one's just hatred for the media. It's okay to hate the media, but like...
But why do you think saying, if you suggest that some Jewish people are satanic and you're referencing the Bible, do you
think that's what he's doing, though? Do you he's just like, oh, well, you know, but like, what does them having to be Jewish have to do with anything? Like, let's say someone was like, those evil white people. I'm not saying all white people are bad, just
that's
those evil
fine.
ones.
I
like,
agree.
Well, why'd you bring up the fact that they're white? Why don't you say some evil people?
No, I agree, but I would agree with it. I'd be like, for sure, we got to.
He seems to focus on the Jewish thing a lot.
For sure. But all right, so we'll go say the satanic Jews. That was kind of taken out of proportion. His termite statement was, he said, I'm not an anti-Semite, I'm anti-termite, which is the same thing as basically saying I'm not anti-Jewish, I just don't like satanic Jews. I just don't find it.
Oh yeah, you think so? But why bring that up? Why, if he's saying, oh, I'm not anti-Semite, I'm anti-termite, and he does that weird thing with his mouth when he says it, like you don't see the subtle messagery there.
To me, if someone said I don't dislike white people, but I don't like white devils, I'd be like Clayton Bixby.
If someone came out, let's just say Tamika Mallory goes up and she's like I don't have to think of a catchy rhyme. I'm not gonna make it rhyme. Let's say she was like, oh, I'm not anti-white. Like she says it like this, right?
Yeah.
I'm not anti-white, I'm anti-devil. But like, you know what I'm saying?
If she's talking about the right people, I'd be like,
the devils so much. They've been called white devils by people she admires, like Malcolm X when he was more radical, and all these other figures who were explicitly anti-white. And then she's like, oh, I'm not anti-white, I'm anti-devil. You know, and then they have no white friends, and they have none of this and that and that.
Yeah.
You don't draw that parallel when he says, oh, I'm not anti-Semite, I'm anti-termite. Like, what do you think that means?
Here's the thing. If the context of her whole argument, if she was pointing out bad white people, I would be like, go get them, girl. Go get those white devils, baby girl. As long as she's pointing out where I find with Farrakhan, although there are elements for sure that like I'll just totally not agree with that. Like we don't line up 100%. Clearly, we have quite different agenda paths here. But when he says these things and then you listen to the 10-15 minute thing, he's calling out the wars. He's calling out the wars in the Middle East. He's calling out the media that's perverting, you know, the normal order of society. So I find that he does pick out the right Jews, just like when he goes at the right white people.
Yeah, I mean, you can always find bad people who have good ideas on certain things. I mean, Hitler put fluoride in the water or something. Oh, you might agree fluoride in the water is bad, but I'm just saying he believed in sanitized water. You know what I mean?
You want the fluoride in the water, Nuance?
That's a bad thing.
You're trying to put the fluoride in the water too, Nuance?
No, I'm not. Just take the fluoride out. Just general water sanitation, right?
No,
like,
yeah,
you could,
but that to me,
water sanitation is bad because a bad person believes in a good thing.
It's an extreme example though, where if you listen to, and maybe you disagree, because honestly, most of my audience probably does, but when I listen to Farrakhan, I find it's not like, oh, he was right about that one thing. It's like, oh, he's pretty much telling the truth about almost everything, but he does have an agenda. He does have a, you know,
I don't know about the truth about everything.
He has a Black Muslim agenda for sure, and his Black Muslim agenda doesn't quite add up to my not Black Muslim agenda.
I would say pretty much all of that stuff is false, by the way.
But if you like
a lot of
the arguments in the context of the stuff he's talking about.
Islam?
No, I'm not. That's what I'm saying. Because people get it wrong. They're like, An0maly, you hate Jews? You did that? No, not at all. I actually am like literally my friend who texts me all the time, who will like send me links to stuff. He's 100% Jewish. I was just chilling with Roseanne. I have respect for Israelis and Jews highly, and I don't discriminate against anyone. But also, Farrakhan has said, he's like, if there can be good and bad Christians and good and bad Muslims, why in the world could there not be good and bad Jews? And even you said it yourself in the AIPAC thing, where it's like, if you notice, if you start to touch on certain topics, they're like, you can't say that. Oh, it's anti-Semitic. It's anti-Semitic. And you're like, is it though? Because like there is anti.
Yeah, but he hates white people too. I'm just saying he hates Jews and he hates white people.
Well, to me,
do you know who Yakub is?
Not quite.
Yeah, he believes that white people are the invention of this black scientist by the name of Yakub 6,600 years ago, and that they're a separate race from human beings. They're this evil race created by this evil black scientist.
But do you know
he believes in kooky shit.
You know what's funny about that? And this is the one thing where I think I'd be able to get him in a debate. Did you know he's actually part white? His father is mixed race and he's white.
I'm not surprised. He's pretty light skinned. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
So there's the hypocrisy there of like, okay, so are you part evil then? You know, if that's how you feel. So me, I'm at the point now. I just like, and even in business, some people think I'm cold and mean because I manage myself, but I'm not. I'm just like trying to get to the point because I don't have time. Like kind of like Trump, if you read Art of the Deal, very similar. No, but it's like I agree with you on that. I don't think everything he says is right. I just find him a lot funnier and more to the point where it's like I'd rather.
Oh, absolutely. I don't listen. I'll watch people like Louis Farrakhan, no problem. I can laugh at a lot of the things they say just because it's so outrageous.
Dude, he's right.
I'll watch Alex Jones, and this might get be controversial, but he's freaking hilarious. It's like,
and he's not wrong.
Look at him screaming and taking his shirt off and stuff. It's funny.
But Alex is the same kind of way. Where like, do I agree with everything Alex says? Absolutely not. Do some things I think he kind of runs with and not really. Yes, but the overarching theme seems to be spot on with Alex too. I mean, like I find
overarching he's spot on. You think so? With
the globalists, and he's using words that people are using now 10, 15, 20 years ago. I think he understood.
Yeah, he can talk about that, but he gets almost like it's down to specifics. He gets it wrong so often. It's so over the top speculative. It's ridiculous.
But I do think if you listen to Farrakhan and give him like a 20, 30 minute clip.
I've listened to Farrakhan plenty.
You don't think he has a lot of truth?
No, like I was saying, all these people can have aspects and elements of truth that can resonate a lot, but overall, they're usually pretty bad people who have really bad agendas, and they say a lot of like the Yakub thing. Like that's just ridiculous. When he starts talking about Jews being satanic and the termite thing, like.
I think some Jews are satanic. I think some Muslims are satanic. I think some Christians are satanic.
I don't really believe in Satan, so I don't believe in that satanic stuff.
Yeah, so I believe that there's people of every race, religion, and gender that have opened their spirit to the devil. So that to me it doesn't.
But he focuses on the Jews a lot. So,
it doesn't.
He's not focusing on satanic Muslims really.
Yeah, no, well, I don't think he's even keeled, but also if, talking about percentages, you have 1-2% of populations who clearly have a lot more power and influence. So it's and there's 0% media coverage on it at all. And if you talk about it, they'll say you can't talk about it. So it's like Christians you can bash all day, white people you could bash all day, but you can't even mention AIPAC. Those are the type of things where I'm like, all right, well, I want to get to the source. And if more people, I think, were like Farrakhan and Trump and just saying what they felt, I don't care that he thinks white people were created in a lab. Like, to me, it doesn't even bother
and that
me. You know,
he thinks they're evil.
It still doesn't bother me. I think it's kind of hilarious, and I don't particularly believe in that. But to me,
I'm not triggered by it, but I just think it's a stupid idea.
It's interesting to me. Even that's interesting. Where it's like, was I created
interesting and still stupid and incorrect? Like, obviously, but weren't created.
I like people like him and Trump, although they're obviously different and probably don't like each other very much. To me, if everyone was like that, like Jewish people were like that, Muslims were like that, Christians were like that, we'd get to the truth very quickly, because Farrakhan could say the craziest thing.
No, that's when society would collapse. What you're talking?
No, it would be great.
Everyone was like them.
It would be crazy. It would be great. It would be like, even like Alex Jones.
Civil war.
People don't like Alex Jones, but it's like the media that censored Alex Jones is 100 times worse than Alex Jones. And it's like all the people that hate on Farrakhan, I feel like they're 100 times less wise and accurate. I'm not saying he's the be-all end-all. I'm not saying Trump's the be-all end-all. I'm not saying that Alex Jones is the be-all end-all. But in my personal perspective, if everyone just shot out how they felt, there's no like passive aggressive, like, we don't want to build it. It's like, this is how I feel as a Black Muslim. This is how I feel as a white.
Yeah, but a lot of Christian feel are really stupid and wrong and shitty. So it doesn't, like, that's nice. I guess you're being kind of honest about it. But even in a sense, like, you think they're being honest, and a lot of times they're not being honest.
But at least it's like, it's,
you think this whole thing with Alex Jones and Joe Rogan is like honest stuff going on? You think Jones is like, what he's saying about Joe Rogan is like true, like that Joe's like this bad person who's been co-opted by the CIA or whatever?
It's theatrical, and Alex definitely muddies the water a lot with a lot of stuff. I'm not, once again, he's not the be all end all, but I just like people, even with Farrakhan, he doesn't mince his words. With Trump, he doesn't mince his words. To me, it's a lot easier to navigate. And then I could go to a Farrakhan. I could say, hey, that, and that. Like, he'll bring up points that the media would never bring up. And I'll be like, okay, interesting. But then the other points, like, he's like, you are white, I hate you, you're created in a lab. I'd be like, I don't agree. But like, I guess to me, I appreciate the bluntness, and that there's probably millions of people who feel the way that Farrakhan feels, and they'll just never say it. I want it to be out there, even when like,
I don't believe in censoring people. I don't believe in like ever trying to put that stuff down. I think it's important to see that stuff out there in the open. I think that's great.
It's helpful, and it's healthy.
I can still say that Farrakhan is not a good person.
I mean, I'll quote Farrakhan in this, and I think that, like, regardless of what you feel about him, it's true. And regardless of what God you believe in, I'd say, they asked him, who is a good and bad Jew, who's a good and bad Christian, who's a good and bad Muslim. He said, only God knows. You know, I don't know who's good and bad. I have my suspicions, but only God knows who the good and bad are.
To me, I think he speaks about those people a lot in pretty certain terms. But then when someone asks him directly like that, then he says, well, only God knows for sure. It's like, well, then tell us what you think, man. Don't use that cop.
Well, I'll watch his Nation of Islam streams where he's going hard because he's around his people. I find it just blunt, you know, where it's like, there's certain parts of it that make me cringe a little bit, because like, it's like,
but don't confuse bluntness with honesty.
No, I'm not. But when you're blunt, like, don't confuse honesty with stupidity, because, you know, if he says 90% honest stuff and 10%
I didn't say he's a stupid person.
No, but I'm saying
his ideas are stupid.
Yeah, but if he's 90% honest, and I'm saying in an interview, and you give him credit for 20%, it doesn't make that any less true or wise, because you don't credit it. And same
I
with,
didn't catch that part.
Well, I'm saying I think we have a different maybe belief of how much of it is accurate or not. And I've not seen, there's been elements where I'm like, I can't say I've seen every interview or something, but with everybody, I hear what they say, and then I go watch it for myself, and it's very rarely the same. With Trump, the reason I didn't like Trump was because I heard what other people were saying about him, and then I watched him, and I was like, oh, this guy's pretty real. You know, I was like, he's calling out things I didn't think he was. And I heard all the things about Farrakhan, but to be honest, before I heard all the hate, I'd already known who he was. So I was like, what? And then I started, but it's like, it's not that he's the greatest person. It's not that there's not critiques and there's not falsities, I'm sure, in the argument, but when I hear people talk about him and I listen to him, I always find his things more insightful, more intriguing, and I learn things. I have Christian friends that are really Christian, and I'll have references to the Bible and Christian stories about Christians, and they're like, "Dude, I never heard of that." And they're like, "Where'd you hear that?" I was like, "Farrakhan." You know, like he'll teach me things about Christianity where I'm sure his agenda is probably not mine. I actually know for sure it's not mine, and I don't necessarily think his overarching agenda is beneficial to me at all. But I find that I just can't ignore the wisdom and logic. And I find it very like I'm starting to like these people where it's like, I don't like the sugar coating. Just give it to me raw and I'll take the good elements and I'll leave the bad elements.
Yeah, I don't know. Like it to say it's raw, like it might appear raw to you because he's saying things that are not necessarily spoken in the mainstream. But
Yeah.
I mean it's raw necessarily and truthful. It could be that he's actually a pretty manipulative guy. And don't you think he's saying a lot of the things that he's saying in order to manipulate his audience, manipulate, some of the people watching him, and like a lot of it's manipulation. It's not necessarily raw truth that he's espousing.
No, I agree that some of it is probably manipulation for his overarching agenda, where he probably wants to draw people in and then hook, line, and sinker for what he wants to do. But to me, like I'm only responsible for myself as far as when I watch it. So I take the gems and I don't take the bait. So, I don't disagree.
Yeah, I actually encourage everyone to always go and watch even some of the most despicable people out there. I think
I don't
you
think
can
he's that
learn a lot.
despicable, though. I just find it's a false narrative. I do agree that he's definitely a very good speaker and manipulative to what he wants. But like, man, I've listened to people talk about him for a year, and honestly, for a while, I said nothing publicly because it's very controversial on the right wing. They'll try to ruin your life if you say you listen to Farrakhan. But like, I've listened to hours of him speak, and like, dude, I've disagreed with him a few times, but I've learned like 50 things. And also like
A few times.
the argument he's
I
making.
hope it's a little more than just a few times.
I mean, just a few, honestly. And that goes against white people and stuff. It's just like, I just like the raw truth. And if it's true, it doesn't offend me. Like, I don't believe that my ancestors, I don't see that my
BS.
Yeah, no, you're entitled to that opinion, but I guess, I'm so deprived from not just the media, but like say right wingers. There's some people I enjoy. I like your channel because you actually do things that other people don't do. So I like to learn. And a lot of these right wingers I'm friends with, and there's some people that do exceptional work, but a lot of them are just saying the same things I already know on loop. Like the GDP's up, Black and Hispanic unemployment's down. Like for sure, we get it, bro. It's like
Charlie Kirk's statistics over and over again.
And like even Charlie, sometimes he's got a cool statistic every now and then, but like I like to learn. So like I'm tapped out of this element where I have to go. It's kind of like with Trump. People say to me, do you agree with the fact he did this or said this? I'm like, absolutely not. However, he's the only one doing it, baby. So let's go. So it's like same with Farrakhan.
No, I understand what you're saying.
With Farrakhan, he's the only one.
I always go out and I try to
certain things he's the only one saying. So I'm like, I would love to find a source that could say similar things without potentially thinking I grew up in a lab. Like it's like that's not my number one. I'm not like, yeah, let me find a guy who thinks I grew up in a lab, but it's like, why is Kanye bipolar? I don't know, but he makes great music. Like I can't deny greatness and I can't deny wisdom. And I find it like, it's weird. Like, I'm just like, man, I want something raw, and it could be a little mean. It's like, yo, get your shit together, bro. And you're like, all right, you right. Like it's on some like, all right. It's just more exciting to me than like, the GDP is up. And I'm like, dude, the whole financial system's a lie and they could probably crash the market at any time. Like that's the type of stuff that's always appealed to me.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people like go out and learn new things, that even things that you disagree with. I always tell people, like people come to me like, "Hey, what do you think are some news sources or some good like political commentators I should listen to in order to have a more nuanced perspective?" I'm like, whatever you believe right now, go watch people who believe the opposite and listen to people like more than you listen to the people you agree with. and I say go and look at, cross-reference news sources, all that stuff. I'll go out and I'll look at like crazy conspiracy theories all the time. Like I'll look at like pretty controversial ones that are really bad. I won't say what they are, but like I'll look into them just to like, I'm not gonna the things get controversial, but I look into things because I like to learn. And oftentimes I'll come across people who actually believe those things. And because I've researched what they believe, I've also looked at counterpoints of what they believe. And I can actually argue or have a conversation with them. And oftentimes I can persuade them away from believing some of the crazy things that they believe. So I think it's important to, look at all that stuff.
No, and you made a good point, and that's what I really like about your videos as well, as you're always building an argument. Whereas if even I disagree with one or two things, most of the time it's structured in a way that it's almost impossible to not agree with you because you've laid it out there so clearly. And I do similar stuff a lot, but that's what I like, where it's like, whether it's Farrakhan, even like flat earth, or, all these things where people get a little too cocky. I find, like, if you believe in the traditional globe theory or you hate Farrakhan, you're in the majority when it comes to conservative and basic science, I guess, so that's, you can't get cocky still. And I think that's the downfall, where people just say F him, racist, bigot, anti-Semite, where it's like, you might be right, but now you have to form that argument and explain exactly how. And I what I'm starting to find is, the left got lazy and called everyone racist, sexist, xenophobe. And then they realized they went from scientists to like complete morons over the course of 5 years. And now they don't even know science, where that's kind of where I'm questioning the right. It's not that I'm telling you to go out there and join the Nation of Islam, like, not at all. I'm just saying, when people go to debate these people and they start to formulate their arguments, I'm starting to realize that people have worse arguments than the people they're hating on, and hate never looks good. Racist, sexist, anti-Semite. And if it's truly, but like these labels to me, even like tell me why it's racist, tell me why. And a lot of people can't articulate. So I find that's where a lot of people have gotten. They've gotten so comfortable in their beliefs that they're not even able to formulate an argument, even if they are right. And there is a lot of valid things. Just show it to me. And that's why I like people that are like bang, 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 where it's like, okay, interesting. It's a fun rabbit hole to pop down.
Yeah, I agree. I don't like when people just parrot talking points that they've heard from other people. Like, always go to the source. So if you're talking about someone like Farrakhan and you're saying like, oh, well, I think he's bad because of this and that, and like this person told me this, it's like, always go to the source and you can make your good argument. Like, I've gone to the source. I can tell you the things he says is really bad usually. So
what's bad though? That's like, bad's a blanket statement.
What we talked, I told you about like Yaqub and all those different things. So I've seen his stuff. Like, I would encourage you to go look up his stuff about Yaqub, which is an idea promoted by Muhammad, his teacher, founder. I think he's the founder of the Nation of Islam. I'm not entirely sure.
Is it that bad though? Like, I mean, I'm not saying it's not, but like, to me, I hear it's
bad. It's untruthful.
It's just, it doesn't change my life at all, in the sense of like, I can't disprove that. Like, obviously, I'm not of the thought that I'm created in a lab by a scientist to make evil. Like, obviously, I don't want to believe that.
6,600 years ago, very specific.
I believe I'm a child of God, and I'm blessed, hopefully. But like, at the same time, I find it an intriguing argument, and I can't particularly rule it out.
It's not an argument; it's a story.
And that's why, honestly, not just that. That's obviously a more extreme one, but history I find intriguing, and I see how much the media lies now. I'm not attached to history at all. So like, a lot of people are like, if it's over 200 years old, I'm already questioning it to the utmost extent. So if someone adds a little fuel to that fire with something else weird, a lot of people are like, no, because they're so sure of themselves. But I look at the history books and I'm like, I don't even believe half the stuff anyway. So it doesn't like change my perception, because I'm like, dude, I don't believe most of what they say.
Yeah, something doesn't have to affect your life personally to any sort of great or even minuscule degree for you to still say, I don't like incorrect or wrong or bullshit information. So when they talk about Yaqub, and it's to justify, certain actions and beliefs and treatment towards people, which I don't like as well. So
yeah, I mean, the religion agenda, if I've been saying this recently, because I really looked into it, if you really look at it, you have Muslims who they believe Jesus was the prophet, not the God. Christians believe he was God. They believe he was a prophet warning, and then he's going to come back again. It's almost like, in a way, I feel like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy where Muslims have this agenda of like potentially caliphate, take over, apocalypse style, Jesus is back or God's back. Christians have like something bad's gonna happen probably, but like it's gonna be good. We're gonna go to heaven. So it seems to me like that's why I like to get to the root of the argument, where even I'm losing the favor of my audience now. They're like, An0maly's getting wrecked. I knew it happened. They really hate, but I want to get it all out there because it's like there's some, like, even with all of our mindsets and our religions, there's something happening clearly. And if we don't look at it and we just label everyone as bad, and a lot of people do that with opposing religions or ideologies, then it's going to play out. And to be honest, I don't see it right at this moment, besides of course the heaven and the Bible stuff. Like, yeah, that's great, obviously, but on a world scale, it's not going to end good for Americans or Christians, I believe, because I think other religions are, overpopulating at a huge rate, gaining, power, momentum. And you have Christians where I believe it's more like aborting babies, not populating. So a lot of my stuff is not like people are like, oh, An0maly is anti-Semitic or anti-Christian. Like, not at all. It's kind of like a warning to people where it's like, dude, if you're talking about the world, it doesn't look like it's going to work out well for you, for us, if we continue down this path. So it's like these uncomfortable rabbit holes kind of, to me, I'm just like looking 50 years down the road, and it's like, dude, if you can not, or like Farrakhan or anyone, but if you don't pay attention to demographics and science and basic math, it's not going to go well for us.
Yeah, I agree. Science is important, and I think a lot of people ignore it, or they'll, they'll try to put out like they'll try to insult you or destroy your character for just having conversation about things. But science is science, and I think it's important. It's funny because the left used to be the party of science, and then at least they try to position themselves that way and be like, oh, look at these these conservatives that they believe in like young earth creationism, and they're anti-evolution, and they don't believe in global warming and this and that. But then on the other hand, they also don't believe in a lot of scientific stuff as well when it comes to like, food safety, GMOs, or even a lot of like the vaccine stuff was started on the left. So they're kind of hypocrites in a way as well.
And the big point I'm making, and I know even a lot of people in my chat don't want to hear it, when you become, the reason the left is losing a lot is because they just got too cocky. Like, they thought science and truth and liberalism was just something that they owned rather than practiced. It's like in your religion too. It's like you can read the text and you can go to church, but if you don't live the gospel, you're not really doing yourself a service. And I see that on the right wing, and I'll take the heat because I know they don't want to hear this stuff, and they get mad at me and call me all this stuff. The reason I'm saying it is because the reason the right wing is winning now is because it's rooted in self-accountability and truth, and people are evolving and waking up and using science and reality. But if you get to the point where you get cocky, Trump won, you're libtards, we're smart, you're dumb, they're racist, everyone, that's a bad person, and you don't develop your argument or search and learn and evolve, it's going to flip back, or conservatives are going to take the L. So a lot of people misconstrue me, and they're like, An0maly must feel this way, he must really hate this. No, I'm warning you that if you just think you're winning just because you're winning, and you don't actually practice like debate, discussion, and get a valid argument, the tables will turn again. And it's like a battle of who can be less like cocky. Honestly, it's pretty weird.
Yeah, I absolutely agree on that front, because a lot of people, you saw in the election of Trump, a lot of people, like most people, like, oh, Trump's never going to win, this and that. Like, I don't personally know anyone who supports Trump. Like, people would have an idea, but it's like they had no clue about people who lived outside of them. They had no clue, even a lot of people that they might have known or encountered with in their day-to-day life would support Trump, but no one would actually voice it, because they kind of molded the culture in a way where it's like, if you support Trump, you're a racist, xenophobe, bigot, this and that. It's like, okay, I'll just shut up then, and I'll vote in secret and just not tell anybody. And they created that they created that sort of society where no one would want to talk about things. So if they shut down the debate and discussion, well, maybe you could have changed someone's mind who wanted to vote for Trump or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but you didn't even know they were a voter in the first place because you were going to shame them to all hell and call them a bad person before you could even have a discussion. So,
Yeah.
like you were saying, if the right wing does that with people on the left and calls them, oh, libtard cuck and all that stuff, well, then it could, like you said, swing the other way as well.
Yeah, and even religion-wise, right? Obviously, I'm not saying you can't question certain religions or have your skepticisms or go hard, but there are people of certain religions that are trying to be conservative, but they're not really welcome because people don't like their religion and they don't trust anyone from the religion. And I know these people, like, they're not lying. It's just like everybody has their own interpretation and not everyone follows it word by word. That's true to so like, you're going to lose, and the right's been good at that, but the left, they hated on everybody. They didn't want to talk about it. You're a bad person. And that's with the not just Farrakhan, but that's one example where the right, I feel like they're dropping the ball a little bit. Not that they have to like him or believe everything he says, but you got to really fine tune your argument, or else, on a bigger scale. And even people are like, there's no way we're going to win. She's stupid. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stupid. It's like, dude, we can't do, like, I'm just seeing flashbacks to like 2016 Democrat where I saw them dropping the ball and I'm like, why are you doing this? And now they're like, no, we can't lose. We're better than the libtards. It's like, dude, you're going to lose again. We gotta like maintain strength and unity and broaden. I know people don't like Trump, Democrats forever, that are like, dude, I might vote for him just because they're so tired of the media, like so tired, and they never knew about it. But they're like, dude, F these people. They're just pissing everyone off.
Yeah, the way a lot of people are treating AOC right now, for example, it's very reminiscent of when the left was treating people like Trump. They're like, oh, look at Drumpf, like these little stupid attacks on someone like Trump. Like, oh, they called him Drumpf. Like, oh, we owned him. We just called him Drumpf. Or with AOC, they'll like, they'll like talk about her buck teeth or whatever. They'll just like little stupid insults. Like, oh, look, she wore that expensive outfit during a GQ shoot. It's like, yeah, and she gave it back. Like, that's how photo shoots work. These are the stupid fucking arguments against someone that you disagree with. Like, talk about the policy, talk about this. Don't engage in this. Like, oh, like just some of the memes.
Yeah, they're not funny and they're mean.
It's really counterproductive.
They're not funny. They're mean. They're counterproductive. And to me, it's like if I'm with a girl and she'll look over at another cute girl or someone who's not so cute maybe and just be like, look at her outfit. Like, I've never, like, that to me, that just screams like, I'm not secure with myself. Exactly. So it's like, I feel that with, like, I don't agree with most of what Cortez says, but either you're about the truth or you're just mad. And it's not good to just be like hateful. I don't hate Alexandria Ocasio. I don't hate, there's people I strongly dislike, and I do believe probably need to be held accountable for what they're doing. But I don't live with hate. And I feel like it's very unpopular on the left, which is weird because my type of personality should be like trademark left, but they hate me now. Low key, I think they like me, but I don't know. But on the right too, it's like they want me to hate certain people. And I'm like, it's not how I feel. Kind of like you. Sometimes I say you're on the fence. Like, if I don't feel that way, it's not I'm on the fence. I literally just I don't live that way. And I find it to be a lot more productive and helpful than like, look at her boots. And it's like,
their boots.
Yeah. With the cinema girl, I don't like her, but I was like, honestly, she looked kind of cute. Like, yeah, she looked like she was going out to like a cheap bar or something, but I was like, she looked hotter.
Who cares, man? This is not the important stuff.
Exactly. Well, we'll wrap it up, and I'm going to put this on Apple Podcasts and Google Play as well for the Make America Debate Again podcast. This has been a great discussion. I knew it was going to flow easily because we were like, what should we talk about? I was like, dude, it's going to be harder to stop talking. I know we'll pop into it. So let people know where they can find you and then give them a closing statement. And guys, I can't tell if you're hating on me or Nuance Bro now because of all the earlier stuff. It might be directed towards me, but show him some love and really check out his videos. He might make you mad. He might challenge your preconditioned beliefs, but I guarantee you will watch Nuance Bro and learn something and probably more than you will with other people. So show him some love.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to find me, just YouTube, Nuance Bro, Twitter, Nuance Bro, all that good stuff. Thanks for having me on. We were talking about this for a while, and people were like, when are you going to have Nuance Bro? And you're like, Oh, I don't know, man. He hasn't gotten back to me. I'm like, I'm here, man. I'm here to talk.
No, what I said was, I was like, dude, we were messaging, and I was like, I was like, he was getting annoying, but I was like, because I was like, what are we talking about? We couldn't figure it out, and I was like, it just kind of like, I was like, get excited, or so. I was joking. You're like, I'm nuanced. I'm not gonna get excited.
Yeah, I'm just like, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. Like, whatever.
No, but then I was, I mean, everyone kept requesting you, and then I was just watching your video, and I was inspired. I was like, all right, let me get Nuance on the line, because you know,
Yeah, so I've seen you like some of my Twitter posts. I'm like, all right, he knows what's up.
no, I genuinely, I'm not afraid to say how I feel about anything. I genuinely like your videos, and I wouldn't say this if I didn't believe it. It's not just pep. I believe that you're doing some of the most important work, because you're doing arguments people aren't making. You're like, everyone's doing certain topics all the time, but you'll go at the topics that no one's doing. And that's the things I like more than, like, I can listen to someone say what I already know, but I'm trying to learn, and I learn a lot. And also clips, like, you're one of the only people besides me that I watch, and I'm genuinely impressed. Not that I'm impressed with myself, but you'll have clips of other things I wouldn't have found, and I'm like, oh, I never saw that. Like the Trump
Dude,
clip.
you know how hard it was to find that Neil Cavuto Trump clip? Like, Fox News is deleted. It doesn't exist on their stuff anymore.
That was rare,
what happened.
bro.
Like, they must have gotten a message from Trump or something to delete that clip, but I had to search hard, recruit help to find that clip.
Yeah, you're tagged now. They got you now. The AI's onto you. They're like, Nuance Bro found the clip that we tried to delete.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, brother. God bless everyone watching. We appreciate you. And do check out Nuance. You might be mad like me when I talk about Farrakhan, but low key, it's kind of funny, and you'll probably learn something. So thank you guys. Make America debate again. We're out.